City Council meeting this evening on April the 8th of 2024. We appreciate you joining us this evening. We'll start our meeting tonight by having Councilmember Pulver lead us in a thought or an invocation at his choice or both, and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mayor, I'm going to do an invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, as we come together as a city and we listen to citizens and get all the information we need as a city council to make decisions, that, Lord, we can ask thee for help and guidance to understand and know all the pros and cons of things so that we can make the correct decision for our entire citizenry. Lord, as we look to the spring, that we can enjoy the weather and look out for what things to come. And Lord, as we come to celebrate Easter, that we can understand the reason for the celebration. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Pulver. Councilmember Severing has been asked to be excused this evening. So we'll start into our consent agenda. Council, do you have any potential conflicts of interest you'd like to disclose this evening? I see none. We'll move on then to have an action to approve the March 18th, 2024 City Council meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved, Mayor.
Councilmember Pulver has motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Councilmember Watson, second. Is there any further corrections or discussion on the minutes? Not all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. We'll now hear from Dylan Hill. Dylan is going to talk to us about some conditional acceptance of subdivision improvements at White Rock, and then also the final acceptance of the subdivision improvements at Patriot Point, phases 1A, 18, and 2.
Awesome. Thanks for having me tonight, Mayor and Council. The first subdivision is White Rock Phase 3. It's a 7-lot subdivision that was recorded in April of 2024. The public improvements include sewer, water, curb and gutter, sidewalk, guardrail, and streetlights. Another phase is currently in the construction process now. All the improvements are up to the city code and standard, and it is my recommendation to approve the conditional status for the subdivision and start the 1-year warranty period.
Thank you, Dylan. Do you have any questions, council, for Mr. Hill? Councilmember Pulver?
You said guardrail? Where is that at the top?
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
just below the divide road. So they had to extend it like 120 feet or so.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
Any other questions of Dylan? All right, we have a motion then to approve conditional acceptance of subdivision improvements at White Rock Phase 3.
Mayor, I move that we approve the conditional acceptance of the White Rock Phase 3 subdivision.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Delpaz. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Any questions, discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion also passes unanimously. Okay, Mr. Hill, do you want to talk to us about the final acceptance at Patriot Point, phases 1A, 18, and 2?
Yep. So Patriot Point, it's 1A, 1B, and Phase 2. This 24 townhome project with like 80 units, something like that. This subdivision was recorded in September of 22, and I came before the council and conditional status was approved. This is a mix of public and private improvements. In this subdivision, the public roadways and improvements include 150 East 2300 north, sewer, water, storm drain, sidewalks. They had ADA ramps down there, street lights. Like I said, I came in September 22 where they got conditional approval for that. It is the recommendation of Eric Casperson, our city engineer, to provide final acceptance of the subdivision improvements. The improvements are up to the city code and standards, and the warranty period has expired. North Ogden City would take responsibility for the public roadways and improvements.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hill on Patriot Point? Councilmember Delpez?
Just double checking. I'm trying to remember if these are private roads, as in they do their own snow plowing and everything. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and if you drive down on 150, you'll see blue and green street signs that signify what are the public and what are the private.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, then I'll look for a motion to approve Mr. Hill's recommendation.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the final acceptance of the subdivision improvements at Patriot Point.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Pulver. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Now enter in, thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it. We'll now enter into our active agenda. We'll have public comments. Those who would like to comment, if you would step up to the podium and give us your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden. And just as a reminder, comments will be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. So if you just step up if you have a comment this evening, and John, if there's anybody online, let me know if they'd like to comment.
Let's see, thank you for hearing me out. Let's see, I've been talking to Ryan Nunn on the
Do you want to
planning.
give us your name and if you're a
Oh,
resident?
I'm sorry. Neil knows me. Anyway, my name is Paula Magnuson. I'm a resident of North Ogden. Anyway, so I've been talking to Ryan Nunn about the chicken coop policy. And in 2018, you had it at chicken coops were to be 75 feet away from the neighbor's property, dwelling, and 20 feet off the property line. And then it was changed just recently to be a chicken coop is now an ancillary building, auxiliary building, whatever. And those are to be 3 feet off the property line, but still 75 feet off, away from the neighbor's property. Let's see. I've also been talking to Ryan about numerous discrepancies in the code that things don't match up. Like you have a $5 fee for a chicken coop permit that you no longer give those out. But let's see, excuse me. Let's get to the most current one, which is 14-1-7. Sorry. Okay. Where it says that coops will be treated the same as accessory buildings. However, coops must be maintained not closer than 25 feet from any dwelling on any adjacent lot. And when I was speaking with Ryan, he was saying that's wrong. That's old language. And I was hoping that you as the city council would keep the 75 feet that you have had in 2018, and then it in the newer one, let's see, it was 11-9M10, and now it's 14-1-7. They all say 75 feet away from the house on the neighboring property, and I would strongly suggest keeping that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with chickens, but even the hens are rather loud after they lay eggs. I've had neighbors with dogs in the backyard, and the dogs were quieter than the chickens. So I would ask you to keep it at 75 feet.
Okay, council, do you have any questions? Ms. Magnuson, while she's here? I'm just wondering how with lots now, some of them aren't 75 feet wide. So how, if it's requires 75 feet from the neighbor's property, that would basically prohibit chicken coops.
The discussion at the time was that if it's too close to someone's house, then they would be prohibited for some of the concerns raised by Mrs. Magnuson. So,
Okay,
but-
so,
I do know it's on the list for the council to, or the commission to discuss some of these provisions. It's been requested by others, so this is well timed for the comment.
okay.
Sounds like we'll-
I would also strongly suggest that in any other requirements that, rodent control be strongly enforced and that the cleanliness of the coop, most of the coops that I know of have like a concrete floor that they have straw and other things in there that they can clean in and out and just so that the odor is kept way down to a minimum. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
My name is Alan Robison. I am a resident of North Ogden. I'm here representing the Legacy North Owners Association. I've recently been elected its president. I have with me Kent Bogus, who's also the vice president. The purpose of our being here is we'd like to solicit the North Ogden City Council to consider full or partial responsibility for the asphalt on the roads in the North Legacy complex. My understanding is the roads presently are considered private due to the fact that the builder of the complex made a decision to narrow the roads in the small complex of 80 homes in order to allow for more houses. The main road measures 26 feet across, and basically what it is doing is it said because that is so narrow that the city is unable to provide snow removal because of the fact that it is narrow. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm told that most roads in North Ogden are from 40 to 80 feet wide. The challenge seems to be maintaining the road, which is being narrow due to the fact that the snowplows can't work there properly. So the proposal that we'd like to make to the city council is to basically take over the asphalt, the repair and upkeep of the asphalt. We, as an owners association, will take care of the snow removal, so you don't have to worry about that. There are 80 houses in the complex, and because of the fact that it was narrowed, there are more single dwelling houses in each 1,000 feet of pavement as taxpayers than probably anywhere else in North Ogden. The road being narrow means there's a reduction in cost to maintain the asphalt and the surface level, and we think that's an advantage. The road is used by others and not just us in living in the complex. In other words, people are moving from 2550 north, driving to 2350 north and vice versa. They use the road. Well, somebody can say, well, why don't you put up a gate for just that little bit of road? And that doesn't make sense to any of us because that doesn't solve the problem for emergency providers or service providers. We're talking about 2,114 feet of road, or 2/5 of a mile, and then there are 4 small cul-de-sacs. So we're assuming that if the city were to take over the maintenance and the asphalt, that it would be much less than the others that they do in the city. Most city streets are, I'm told, basically anywhere from 40 to 80 feet. That being the case, that our road would be 65% less, 65% of the cost of the other road or 32% of the wider road. So we'd like to propose to the city that they take over the maintenance of the asphalt only. We'll take care of the snow, and we'd appreciate the city considering that.
Okay, thank you. John, what would be the process?
So typically with these type of requests, cities would get an evaluation from the engineer on the condition of the road. So the council could have all the information about what it would cost to bring it up to our standards, not the width by any means, but maintenance required to get the asphalt into the right condition. And then we'd probably draft some sort of an agreement if the council was agreeable. I'd probably say that would be step 3 after the recommendation from Public Works and the engineer on it. This is fairly common for HOAs to come to cities. And in particular, right now, I think you're going to see it a lot more just because the cost for asphalt and repair work is so expensive compared to what it used to be that some of the reserves in HOAs are not adequate to cover it. So those would be the next steps, is to do a little exploration and then come back to the council with another presentation where we could have the HOA and the engineer do a presentation to you as a group.
Okay,
That'd be all right.
thanks for attending. And
Thank
John,
you.
you'll head that up.
Yep.
My name is Connie Eden. I am a resident of North Ogden. I would just like to address the City Code 14-1-10, which is the animals and fowl. It seems that there are some discrepancies in the footage as far as a dwelling place adjacent and other people's property lines. It's causing a lot of contention because I've come down like 3 times, and each time I've come down to talk to the city, they did inform me that there's no longer like a fee that you have to pay. But I did receive 2 different printouts stating, one of them said like 25 feet from a dwelling place and the other one said 75. Randy told me that there was going to be a meeting held. That was last month because so many of the newer homes and a lot of the older homes just simply don't have that large of a yard. So I was told by animal control that they have to enforce the greatest offense, which would be like the 75 feet. And it just seems like we need to clarify and just have one flat line. This is how many feet are permitted so that there's not so much room for error.
Okay, John, I believe you said the planning commission is going to look at that under Scott's direction to clarify.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor. And that, because it's a land use ordinance, the planning commission will give the council a recommendation on the ordinance to adopt. So there'll be 2 public meetings about it.
So we're aware of the discrepancies now and working towards getting them resolved.
Okay. So
Yes.
in the meantime, what do we do if there's like harassment happening?
Call the police if it's an emergency, or call non-emergency if you can wait a moment to get the police to respond.
Okay,
I think she's asking which, are we enforcing the 75 feet
yeah,
right now, which would make every chicken coop in the city probably illegal. Because that means it'd have to be, your lot would have to be at least 150 feet plus the length of the chicken coop, which are very few lots in our city.
And there's quite a few that have been built without the appropriate permits. So we treat them like a shed in that they should come in and get a land use permit where we can say, hey, this is the appropriate spot to put one. So it would probably encapsulate a lot of, there are definitely a lot of illegal chicken coops in the city. And that'll be part of our item number, what is it, 6, about code enforcement, where we talk about these sorts of things. But so in the interim, the code enforcement, if you're interacting with code enforcement, me and the chief can talk with them and we can figure out what rule we're going to enforce in the interim while we work through the nuances.
Do you know when the meeting's going to be about?
I don't know that I think it'd probably be May 1st would probably be the first time that they're going to talk about chickens on the planning commission. Scott's nodding yes.
Okay,
so one more question. So when my contractor built my coop, he didn't really build it because it's like not a permanent, it's a dog run with 2x4s that go across the top so that like raccoons and fox and whatever can't get in and hurt the chickens. He was told that because it wasn't a permanent structure or like a new construction, that we did not need a permit. We just had to abide by the code enforcement. Is that true?
So that's what the land, so there wouldn't need to be a building permit. There would just be a land use permit, which would help people identify those movable sheds.
Mhm.
And so the chicken coop would fall in that area of like the tough shed that could be picked up and scooted. And so typically if it doesn't have foundation, then it's just the land use permit.
Okay.
So he might have called the building department and they said, no, you don't need a permit from us, but he should have got a land use permit.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Clements, and I'm a citizen of North Ogden. I'm also the liaison with the city for the North Ogden Historical Museum. And I noticed on the agenda tonight that John's going to be talking about budget, and one of the things he's going to be talking about is the Parks and Recreation, which is what we are a part of. Want to remind the city council that we house all of our artifacts in your building, and we appreciate very much you letting us use that building. We do have some concerns, but first of all, we appreciate the fact that Tyler Nicotera is who I correspond with. He's been very good to get back with me. He was able to come over a month or so ago, and we talked about some of the needs. They cleaned our gutters for us, and we appreciate that because those big old trees around the museum put a lot of leaves in the gutter, and it tends to overflow. And then we have to get up, and we're old people. We have to get up on ladders and clean it out. So they took care of that. They checked the roof also. We appreciate that. And that's going to be an ongoing thing. And before that, I'm not sure who it was, before they took the unstable deck out. So that is not a concern anymore. However, there still are some safety issues, and the deck was torn out, but there is a patio. And you're welcome to come over and see the south side of the museum. But there's quite a drop from the cement pad down to close to where the volleyball area is. And that's a safety issue. Anybody who falls off of that that's not going to be a fun thing. So we do need a railing replaced on that. We were hoping we could use the old railing that they took off the old deck, but they indicated that that was not going to be possible. We have a tree still that needs to be cut down. It's in the front yard. It is just very old and it's dying. There's also some siding that has come off of the building, and talking to Tyler, he indicated that he needed to get permission from the city to use some siding that one of our people actually had to put up there, but it doesn't match the old siding. Well, all winter long, the siding's been flapping in the wind, and then the siding we would like to replace it has been laying down. So we would like to get the siding up there to kind of protect the building a little bit more, but he needs permission from you. And I think, Dave, you're familiar with what that need is. We also need the old railing that was taken off of the old deck hauled away. They indicated that they couldn't use that, and we're fine with that. When we talked to Tyler, he indicated that there was no funding for our building. And we were quite surprised because we assumed that since we were part of Parks and Recreation, that there would be some funding for us to maintain that old home museum. And so when I noticed that John was going to be talking about Parks and Recreation budget, I thought I better come and remind everybody, this is your building and we would very much appreciate your help in keeping it looking nice and being safe. So John, are you going to be addressing anything that has to do with the museum tonight? Or will that be, now I understand too that Tyler indicated that they needed to get bids to do some of these things, and they have not had time to get that yet. But he kind of gave us a ballpark figure of how much money they thought they might need.
So council, this, and Susan, this would typically fall under the government buildings, just part of the agenda, which it
Okay.
would, or budget, which would be part of next meeting's agenda.
Okay,
So, but it is a good thing to talk about. In fact, I think our agreement with the museum is about to expire, and Mayor and I have talked about how we need to make some amendments to it anyways, to just clarify. There's some requirements in there for the museum to handle several repairs that the reality is they're just not equipped to do. And so we think that it would be a good time for the council to talk about how to have the city be more involved in supporting that. So.
and we're just concerned that we would appreciate there being something in the budget that can be used to allay some of our concerns, especially the safety concerns.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Looks like someone online, John, has their hand raised.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Amber Hodges and I am a resident of North Ogden. I wanted to voice my concerns about the traffic over off of 2100 and Washington Boulevard in relation to the Tri-City Exchange on Friday afternoons. I reside off of 2100 and Fruitland Drive, and as I am leaving to go pick my children up from school every Friday afternoon, I am horrified at the pedestrians walking in the middle of Washington Boulevard who have just about caused several accidents. The cars that stay parked in the middle lane on Washington Boulevard, the inability to park in any of the local business establishments like the Best Realty Building or Kurt's Drive-In or Miss Kavanaugh's. While I appreciate the purpose of the Tri-City Exchange and I would really like to see it continue, I would also like to see some type of law enforcement to help direct traffic or to make sure that those patrons of the Tri-City Exchange are being directed to be mindful of the cars that are flying down Washington Boulevard or trying to pull out onto Washington Boulevard. It's nigh to impossible to pull out from 2100 onto Washington Boulevard between the hours of noon and 3. And it also causes quite a backup of traffic at that intersection by the Cannery Creamery and Washington Boulevard. And I also have a brother who lives in those townhomes that are just to the north of the Cannery and Bullfrog Spas that has been unable to pull into his own driveway because patrons are parking in his driveway. So my concerns there are mainly about safety. I don't know what the solution is, if it's possible for rezoning. I know this is on the agenda to discuss, but I did want to vocalize my concerns as far as what I have personally witnessed is in relation to near accidents caused involving pedestrians as well as just vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Philip Swanson, North Ogden resident. Council, when you begin your discussions about taking in HOA-owned private roads, bear in mind that, as we've learned in the last several meetings, that we're already $100 million behind the 8 ball when it comes to roads here in North Ogden City. And those are roads that were built to city standards, that were built to city widths, I feel for those that are in the HOAs that have private roads and their HOA fees are having to go up, but they made that choice. The last thing the city really can afford to do right now is to set the precedent that we're going to start taking on these private roads as public streets and allow me, the taxpayer, to cover the cost of their private roads. Thank you.
Sandy Cochran, North Ogden resident. I just have a few comments also on the Tri-City situation. While I can see that they provide a valuable service, I also see that that service is probably going to be much more in demand over the next few weeks and months. If anyone's watched the news, we all know what's going on. That area is already a busy area at any time almost, especially on Fridays. And between 11 and 5, it's pretty bad. I live in that area. I drive by there just about every day. And I've had issues there. There've been at least a couple of times where there are vehicles parked on the road, so you can't see the entrance to their establishment. And as I'm approaching it, a gentleman steps out in the road. I don't see him until he's there in the road, and he wants me to stop so that they can let vehicles out. I understand that, but I can't just stop on a dime if there are vehicles behind me, and that's happened more than once. And I know a lot of residents have voiced things on social media pages wondering, you know, is that business part of their armor business? Is it a separate business? Do they have a business license? Since they ask for donations, are they a 501c3? There's just a lot of unanswered questions and people are concerned about it. And I think every business in the city should be abiding by the city codes. I think they have an amazing service they provide. I just think that's a horrible location for it, and I think they've far outgrown it. Thank you.
Anyone else this evening like to make a public comment?
Reed Miller, North Ogden resident. Hey, there's a concern with regard to HOAs, I know. And I don't think any of you have lived in an HOA. I have. And I don't live there anymore, but I know that there's a great concern. You have 80 residents who are responsible citizens. And when I moved in, I didn't make a choice of, you know, having those roads so narrow. And yet I paid taxes just like anybody else, And there's no gate. Now, if there were a gate, you know, I would say, hey, yeah, let them do it. But there's no gate, so cars can pass through it. And for this being part of the city and having to pay just as equal taxes and really having no choice, because who made it? That John Hanson many years ago, so that he could have the money. But I'm an equal resident of North Ogden, just like anybody else. I can see where, hey, that can be a valuable thing for us. Thank you.
I know the statement of paying taxes has been brought up. I would just remind you that all property taxes go to public safety. So those were, hold it. We all pay taxes, but I just want to remind you the property tax that is being referenced, the entire payment of that property tax is for public safety. So it's not used, property tax is not used for roads, just as a reminder as you think about that. Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's move on to our agenda. Mr. Hess, do you want to speak to the council about Tri-City Exchange? I believe you've got a presentation you wanted to make.
Mayor and council, and I've invited Chief Einen up here just in case there's any questions I can't answer, but at the request of the council, we put together a brief staff report on the history as I know it over the last 4 years of Tri-City Exchange. And I'll just run through this pretty quickly. And John's going to pull up for us the current Google imagery of the most recent imagery of Tri-City Exchange and the way it's kind of operating on site. So in 2021, just prior to me starting, we had an application for a site plan at the request of the city to Mr. Larson. That application came in January, was paid for at the end of February. The hand-drawn site plan, which was part of the staff report, was reviewed and a response letter was submitted back to Mike Larson, stating the several ways that the site plan and the site was not currently up to code. So we looked at it and reviewed it as a commercial use. Food pantries or other, sort of nonprofit food exchanges are not a listed use in our commercial downtown code, or commercial Southtown in this case code. So it would be a use that the planning commission during the site plan process would provide guidance to staff on, whether that's to accept or kind of deny that use. And we would accept it generally as a commercial use. So that being said, just naming a few of the ways that the site isn't currently compliant is it doesn't have any hard surface parking. It has no water retention for any of the water that we would require as retention on site. There's no formal parking, as I understand. Either there's no public restroom, or if there's a public restroom, it may or may not meet ADA compliance. There are several tractor trailers that are refrigerator units that are parked on site that run continuously, essentially. So there's no permanent refrigeration within a permanent building. And a number of those, and also including what happens on Friday afternoons, which is parking up and down the state road, parking in other parking lots, which off-site parking happens for businesses. That's not necessarily a problem. But those issues have started to become safety issues. And so the city, if you were to ask, well, why hasn't the planning department, fixed this issue, is that when an application for a site plan comes in, we don't take, or it's not our responsibility to make an applicant fix all of the issues. We have applications paid for and die due to lack of applicant interest all the time. And that happens with subdivisions, commercial site plans, building permits, you name it, any type of business, any type of, application, land use application may come in, may have the fees paid. We can respond with our red lines and our comments, and they may or may not bring in a complete application after that. Also, the planning department, we're not responsible for code enforcement. We are helpful in code enforcement. So if a community service officer comes over, a CSO, and asks how, based on Title 11 land use code, is a site non-compliant, we provide all of those codes, and then the code enforcement department goes out and deals with that from a code enforcement standpoint. So as far as I know, outside of maybe parking and safety, there hasn't been a call to dispatch about the operation of the food bank itself. And I can't confirm that. And I asked Chief that, and he said during his time he can't confirm that. And I guess it's possible there was an older, code violation or code enforcement request. But generally the site has just operated kind of as is, and nonprofit businesses are allowed under state code to operate without a business license, but they have to provide a copy of the 501c3 documents and incorporating documents as a nonprofit to the city. And my understanding is that that hasn't happened either. So it's just sort of a use that we have, and we have operating in our city. And we understand that it's a multi-city need and use. I mean, it's certainly very busy on Fridays, and there's food insecurity for everybody, to include residents of North Ogden City. We're not exempt from food insecurity, and neither is Ogden, Harrisville, Pleasant View, and our surrounding areas. So regardless of our area median income, I think it is a viable and necessary use. It's just, maybe maybe located in an area that isn't sufficient in size and also isn't necessarily compliant with our commercial standards and our site plan standards. So with that, I'll take any questions that I can answer.
Council, do you have any questions? Who put this on the agenda? I'm just wondering how this got on the agenda.
Councilmember Watson asked me to put together a list of ways that Tri-City Exchange was not meeting the current code.
Okay, thank you.
If I remember right, Councilman Severing asked a question in a meeting, and then I think it was the mayor asked it to be on the agenda. I don't, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, Councilmember Dowpaz, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to say, I remember a meeting 3-ish months ago. We had a couple of resident complaints, it seems like, at that meeting. And at the end of the meeting, it seems like staff was directed to look into anything and anything with the property that should be assessed.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
Councilmember Pulver?
So, Scott, I guess from a code issue, I mean, there's several violations from your understanding as well. And I guess the question for me sometimes is, I know there's certain things that you have to do for food handling. And I guess that's the other question, is that something that we don't do that, right? That's the state.
Well, there's the State Department of Health and then also Health Department. So the county health
County,
department.
okay.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be in the responsibility.
Right. I didn't think so. I just was asking. Okay.
Councilmember Watson?
So, just to be sure that I understand what's happening, the planning department has, made the attempt to bring this up to code, and it hasn't been followed through, and there are safety concerns. Not every property owner in this city follows every entire code perfectly, but when there's safety concerns, that kind of floats to the top and the attention, right? And so we've made attempts to try to bring this up to code, and even though they didn't have to pay a business license fee, they still need to abide by the site plan and prove their business license. So what's happening here is there's a safety concern and there are violations here within the code, right?
Yeah, and I would just maybe correct that to say that the city planning department hasn't attempted to bring this up to code. What we did is we made a response letter to the site plan that was provided for the ways that it did not meet code. And that's typically what we do. So site plans are an administrative approval. You as the legislative body have established the site plan requirements in Title 11. We review it against those commercial guidelines and just state you are required to have this many parking stalls, this much landscaping, this much stormwater retention. This is the size of your parking lot generally, your circulation element. We go through all of these items. And typically, if you're operating with a full-blown business, say, a new financial institution that may have just opened in the city, they have a city engineer they have an engineer on contract that contacts the city, and we work back and forth through all of those red lines.
So I'm sorry, I misspoke. What I meant was communication's been made between the city and the business owner.
Right.
That's what, yeah.
Okay, from reading the staff report, I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. They submitted the application in 2021, and staff came back with all of the recommendations to submit. I believe there was asking for schematics on the actual parking stalls, make sure that they were meeting the 5% landscape requirements, make sure they were meeting the, I think there's like a tree requirement for however many stalls you have, all that stuff. So am I understanding it that they put their first attempt forward to do everything and get everything to where it needs to be, and that it's just basically stalled due to not receiving more information back, and that they might consider that, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as the city, as the you know, they paid their $730 site plan fee, the first one, and we
I
do
saw
have,
that.
we do have some latitude in reducing fees or allowing something to go on. Site plans, if they're not acted on in a year, are typically just dead applications, and so they'd have to reapply and have a new fee, but, you know, the city could consider a friendly, you know, not charge that fee. You've got a site plan fee that's been paid, and let's have the follow-up if they want to draw up a new site plan that shows, you're right, it was parking, landscaping, trash enclosure provisions. We'd like some provisions for, you know, permanent buildings. We don't allow tractor trailers or connexes like shipping containers in any of our commercial zones to be operational unless they are incorporated into the design of the building. So like Northern Ice has one, Kurt's Drive-In has one, but they are connected to and have been designed into the building essentially. But in this case, you've got refrigerated tractor trailers that are operating as the refrigeration units.
Okay. I would say if they're willing to make the next steps forward towards getting it to where those requests are getting worked on, it would be something positive to explore, is to waive the fees for them to do their next application, just because every little bit takes away from the service that they provide to the community. So just a thought.
Councilmember Pulver?
So I guess, you know, from my point of view, I know there's lots of things from code violations, but I think the service itself, I don't think is not necessarily, that's kind of what the city has to worry about. But to me, I think the big, that's, since they're operating within North Ogden, we really need, you know, I think there's probably 3 or 4 different things, regardless of whether we get the code violations. It's the 501c3, it's the UDOT approval, because I mean, it's on a state road. Any health department licensing, you know, with Weber County and or state, like Scott was saying. So, because they are handling food and being handed out. I mean, it should be met with the same type of rigor as going to McDonald's. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, it's a fantastic service, but at the same time, it's within our city and we need to make sure that it's following rules so we don't get people sick. Or killed. I mean, that's the next step. I mean, if someone gets killed on that street and it's our fault, it's going to be horrible. So, I think that's something that I don't know if we've involved UDOT at all on this, because that would be something that needs to be addressed as well. But from a city standpoint, if it's a commercial access that's being on Washington Boulevard, which is a significant thing, it needs to be brought up to code so that we can, even if it's brought up to code, we still have the safety issues. And I think that's the thing that we're kind of worried about. And, you know, I'm not sure how to address that without putting resources against it. But then at the same time, you know, we're pushing resources that we're already thin on to something that is not necessarily our responsibility. So anyway, sorry.
John, could you clarify? I think UDOT doesn't have a prohibition against parking.
So
on
as long
Washington
as
Boulevard.
as long as they're legally parked, and that would typically be, so that the parking of the vehicles would typically be enforced by the local agency, which would be us. The access points, the commercial curb cuts would be enforced by UDOT, and that would be part of the site plan process. And so there's a lot of things going on here in the way we're trying to help this area improve. You know, and we did invite the operator to come tonight so he can answer questions for the council as well, and it'd be worth your time to engage with him. But the real issue is, I think everyone understands this is a good use. So how do we make sure it continues to be a benefit to the community? I'm not saying that we have any authority to say, hey, you need to leave, but like, if it's going to stay here, how it stays here and how it complies. Because the issue that kind of brought this up is we were talking about code enforcement, and there was this discussion of, does the city proactively code enforce, or do we only respond to complaints? And we mentioned there were a couple businesses that aren't following rules, and this was one that was singled out in the discussion as being, there's not a business license, there's not an approved site plan, there's all these issues that have come up. And so the discussion was, how do we work with these groups to bring them into compliance? It's not the only business. that's out of compliance. There's others that we've been talking to as well. And so this is a good one. It is a very political one because of how good the use is. It's part of the reason that staff haven't gone out and, banged on doors and said, hey, we are going to shut you down. And so I think everyone wants to find a path for it forward. It's just, how do we do that? And I think having that engagement with Mike today and getting some commitments and some process, waiving fees is a great example. Because they're already going to be spending some money on engineers and stuff to create a site plan that engineers aren't cheap. I mean, we could ask the two on the council if you work for free, but, so sorry, I hope that's kind of a long answer, but I think that I want to make it very clear that the goal is to create the path forward, not to separate and shut down. So just want to make sure that's very clear.
Councilmember Watson?
I particularly like the part that you said, John, about having a process, because I appreciate the service that's being provided as well. And it's a safety concern to me. I'm not sure if the other businesses that are up to code are as much of a safety concern as this. And I feel like we need to have a process moving forward. If we've communicated since 2021, is that right? 2021, the codes that are being violated that need to be improved on, and we're working together on that progress to be made, but little progress has been made since I'm not sure, but if it has been little progress since 2021, how long does this process last? Because this is a safety concern as long as it goes on. And so if we can make some solutions in a timely manner, then yeah, let's waive the fees. But what's the process if things don't change?
Councilmember Barker?
Can we have the owners come up and talk since they're here? And John mentioned that that's what they were invited for.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It'd be nice to find out what the intentions are.
I had one question before he starts.
Councilmember Delphus?
John, can they get a business license as is? Could they come to the city, apply for a business license, we grant it to them, knowing about all these things, or not?
So there originally was a business license granted for the advanced armor prior to the other one. And then I think since 2001, that's expired and there hasn't been a business license on the property since then.
That's not true. To go back to the very beginning, the $700 and something fee that was charged, that was a site plan for tactical armor or advanced armor. It was for a body armor company. Shortly after, 3 months after we started the process, COVID hit and there was no food for people. We notified the city. We shut that down completely and moved our operation to California. At that point, I started working with the mayor and the city to bring food into our city. He has a document on there. He has 12 documents that he printed off that are there. One of them is my business license with my 501c3 and all that information. We are an active 501c. It's on the agenda papers. There's 12 pages. It shows that. It also shows that there was an active business license that was taken out for the food bank and renewed. Now there's been steps over from, it's been 5 years. They said 4 years. It's been 5 years and 10 days since we started Tri-City Exchange. We worked with the city. They said that they would work with us on the driving on rock instead of on asphalt. It's been 5 years, but we had some issues with somebody tried to take our property from us and we spent 1.5 years in court to get the property back. We got that taken care of in July of last year. I bought the property for $1 million. I paid it down to $362,000 owed. So we're doing our part to show that we are a part of the community. The back half of the property, we lost that. Big deal, but so we have been actually trying to work on it. Again, as he said, we started this 5 years ago. We did talk about some improvements, which we did. We brought bathrooms to the facility. We brought some, our own garbage, etc. And then we got so busy that, nobody contacted us and nobody contacted to them. It's been 5 years. As he said, there has been no complaints. There's been no code violations. So nobody's talked to each other. So it's kind of a shame on you, shame on me. We take the responsibility. As far as, like I said, the licenses, et cetera, that's not even even a close to being an issue. I just snapped this on our way out. I could pass it off to let you see. This is our State Department of Agriculture licenses. We've been licensed since day one as a food bank. We are licensed with the county and the state with food handlers and food repacking. We don't repack. So we have all that taken care of and in place. As far as our reefers that we have on our property, that is our freezers. We don't have three-phase power on the land, and Utah Power says that we can't have it until November of this year, and it's going to cost us $24,000. As far as the reefers, you know, our mayor helped me get my first reefer to put out there and let us put it there to have freezers, et cetera. We had 3 years ago, somebody said it was too loud. So we brought in a second reefer that we have in front of it as a noise wall. So the noise goes up and out. And then we replaced that reefer last year with a brand new model that's whisper quiet. So we've been trying to do these upgrades to make it nicer for the community, et cetera. There's no question there's a lot to be done. My issue here right now, as far as how much are we going to do, how fast, is we do believe that we've outgrown that piece of property. 4 years ago, we had a couple hundred people. During COVID, it was crazy. We couldn't let people out of the cars. And the mayor and the chief of police and that helped us put something together. It was a drive-through. In fact, we did our very first event was Feed the Cities with the fire department to see how that worked. And we raised quite a few $1,000s for Sub for Santa and Fill the Boot. So we knew it could work. So we did it during COVID as a drive-through. We handed it out. We are a permitted egress and egress from the county or the state road. We got that taken care of the very first day we was there when we filled out that original paperwork. The egress onto the pantry side has been a state access since 1961. The egress for the house that's up front has been there since 1963. So they are a legal program there. The state does say that if it's off the yellow or the white line, then people can park legally. Everybody got their driver's license the same way you and I and all of us did. And if they if they violate the law, they should be ticketed. I do our best. We had an issue maybe 3-4 weeks ago where our police department came to us and said our lot monitor was stepping out in the street to stop traffic. We did 2 things to correct that. Number one, we gave them a couple weeks off so they understood this doesn't happen. You don't step off the curb, period. But number 2, we also we coned the front off, the entire red house, the 2067, the neighbor to the north and 2 to the right, or 2 to the north and 1 to the south. We coned that off. Well, we've now coned it off to a total of 250 feet. So there is a definite sight ability to be able to pull out. Our guy that runs the parking lot is not allowed to stop traffic or even step into traffic to allow anybody to do that. That's made a big difference. Also, if you've ever read our posts, we say park at the big parking at Kurtz Drive-In. That's owned by the Katrubases. And we have an agreement with them to use that parking lot on Fridays to park there. So we're not stepping on somebody else. We talk about Bullfrog. You know, that lady said that they were mad. They are not, because we had a forklift go down and I rented their forklift for 7 months while mine was getting fixed. Since then, we now own 3 forklifts, so we don't have that issue with something coming down. We will do whatever we can to improve the property. I have some proposals that I'm working on now that I'll pass this around and let you see this. I can't really get into the full details, but we're working on a different property. And with that property, I have a letter of intent from Volker Ritzinger from Park City. He owns Volker's Bakery. They do their own breads, et cetera, but they do all the breads for Costco in Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, and Nevada, which they have a large commercial bakery. Well, when I say large, their commercial bakery in Salt Lake, 60 by 60. We're looking at a building that is about 32,000 square feet. So we've got a letter of intent from them to North Ogden and to us to bring that business here to our city. He also has the largest ownership and management of sorry about that. I'm going a little slow here. He has the largest ownership and management of farmers markets from Ogden to Park City, Colorado, Wyoming, etc. He's agreed that if he brings a bakery here in North Ogden, he'll also help us bring a farmer's market. The area that I'm talking about purchasing, you guys can probably already see it. It's within, eyesight of ours, but we're in negotiation, so I don't want to share it all and have them raise the price up on the last minute because of who it is. But we are in negotiation to put a bigger building in to bring about $1.9 million in taxable revenue to our city and a farmer's market. So we're trying to do things. Our food bank, and when I first started, our mayor had a good question to me. He says, "This is awesome. I'm going to help you as I can." And he bent over backwards and helped us get our reefer and some of our food contacts, etc. He said, "How are you going to sustain it?" And I told him that, one way or another, I would figure out that and do it through some of the companies that I own out of Utah and some investments I have. We have no issues sustaining it. We have 3 forklifts that are bought and paid for, tune of $192,000. Our reefers are about $185,000. Internal shelving to the store portion is about $70,000. We put the money in, but nobody's ever contacted me and said, "Hey, this has to be done." And I haven't jumped out of my seat to do it either. So shame on all of us. But I'm willing to do what we need to improve it and to make it better. But I also want to discuss, in a different setting, what we have or trying to bring in to our community to help it be self-sustainable. We got an award from our president this year for the best ran private food bank in the nation. I'm honored as heck for that, but at the same time, that doesn't do anything different. We are the only food bank in Utah that is 100% private. We have no state, federal, or city funding, and I've never asked for it. That's not what we're about. My dad raised me. He said, "You learn to take care of yourself, then your family, and then anybody else you can help." And that's the process we're in. I have the money to do it. We have the knowledge. My background isn't in food. I'm a manufacturing engineer, electronics engineer, and a marketing degree. We've moved our body armor company to one of our facilities in California. It's doing what it's doing. COVID hurt it really bad, and it's in the way of growing back. But that has nothing to do with what we're doing here. I think there's so many, I think everybody on the council has had somebody they know go there for assistance. Right now, 60%, and I give you a number, 1,177 families came last Friday to get food. 64% of them are our elderly. I had a lady come up to me with her husband. I've seen her for the last 9 months, and she's been coming on Fridays. Her husband's looks like a hunchback in Notre Dame, about that tall, bent over. And he said, "I had to come and shake your hand and tell you thank you." He said, "We usually eat a good meal once a week, and we have snacks." He says, "Since my wife has been coming here, we've ate every day." So I'm not going to quit, and I'm not going to give up. We're doing it in a way that's positive. We're not creating homeless camps like a lot of the other organizations are. We're making it so they're not. St. Anne's and there's 72 other small pantries, food banks, and outreach shelters that we provide food to on a regular basis so that they can do their part and keep the homeless down and out of our cities. Anytime our city has called me in 5 years for Cherry Days, Founders Dinner, the Nilsson's Christmas, Trunk or Treat, when Ryan fell off the roof, we did a fundraiser and paid his medical bills. We do everything and anything. Every year, all 3 cities, we give school supplies to the police departments to give, not from Tri-City, but from our city. So I'm not asking to look at me. I'm not God. God is the guy upstairs that made me do this. If you've ever watched our video, my wife came home, and I know the mayor thought I was crazy as can be. I said, "Hey, I got this crazy idea, and I can't shake it." That night, my daughter and I was watching Phineas and Ferb, a cartoon from Disney, and he's making a nader. I said, "That's what we ought to do. We ought to make an anti-hunger nader." And my daughter says, "Yeah, we should take over the Tri-City area instead of the Tri-State area." That's how it happened. It was about a week and a half later that we opened the doors, and there was a lot of things that didn't get done. 100%. I didn't hide it. I worked through the mayor, et cetera. There's some things that we didn't see eye to eye on a little bit later, and that's okay. But we're trying to provide the service with as least effort and pain to our city as we can. When something does get brought to us, we address it. Our last chief, he and I sat down and we said, well, let's try this, this, and this. And that's where our cones came from. That's where we spread out and no parking in the front. So people had sight lines, et cetera. Our sergeant a few weeks ago, like I said, says, hey, maybe we should make it bigger and don't let your guys step off the curb. And we've addressed that. We used to have, and I've heard people talk about some of the others. Lindy Best hasn't had an issue with us in a year and a half. We used to have the parking or the line go to the north. Well, what that created was everybody wanted to park to the north. So Bach Storage, people parked in their place. They went across to Lindy's. They went over to the mortuary and they jaywalked. So we come up with a strategy, and the chief and I said, let's move the line the other way to the other. And we made arrangements with the Katrubases to use the parking lot. It's a matter of now, I guess, we're just getting ready to start a new program that will relieve a lot of, it'll be significant traffic. Number one, this entire year and half of last year, our parking lot is for handicapped only. We do have ADA, we use outhouses that are cleaned twice a week, but we do have an ADA outhouse out there that is clean, et cetera. So we take care of our elderly, and that's a big thing because that's who comes. We've been trying to start a new program, but I won't start a program that I can't finish. So our new one we've been working with, and the president of United Way is here tonight with us. We're working with them on a program to help the shut-ins or the elderly not have to come. And who's our worst drivers? Let's face it. As you get older, it's harder to drive. It is an issue. But that includes me buying 2 Sprinter vans, having insurance for any driver. And if you have insurance at home, that each driver gets dinged pretty bad. And if we want to have volunteers, I can't say he's my only driver. So I have to pay a lot more in insurance. So I have that, we have fuel, et cetera. And we've been saving now for a year and a half to start this program to do deliveries to our elderly and shut-in. That'll entail 2 vans doing about 450 deliveries a week on Fridays to eliminate some of our people coming in. It's going to get bigger. There's absolutely no question it's going to get bigger. We've made it in the last 5 years, we've changed our days, we've changed our hours, we've changed through the weeks, through the weekends to find out what was the best and most economical for our citizens and our city, our police departments, and our former chief. That's why we came up with 12:30 to 5 on Fridays. We're done with most of it before our big push is from start to 3:30, and then the line goes away and it starts getting better. We've been experiencing a rush from 4:30 to 5, a half hour that, it gets busy again. But we're not changing our hours. We just are bringing in more volunteers and educating them on how to be faster, et cetera. So we're doing maybe not everything we can, but we're doing everything that we see that we can do at the time. If the city wants to propose something, I'm not against making it prettier. We're working with the fencing company right now. I'm trying to get it down to where I can afford it, but in the front where there's the chain and then the chain link fence, putting a 4-foot white plastic or vinyl fence up that meets code, and it blocks it off as far as what people see as they're driving by. You don't see a dirt parking lot. We're trying to do things that make it aesthetic. The front, they told us that we needed to put in gravel. So we dug 8 inches down last year, and that was one of my big expenses. We put the gravel in out front. Now that the winter's failing and the water's coming, we're getting some weeds growing up through it that we have to spray and kill, but we're trying to achieve that. I hope that you don't say, hey, go away, because if we did, it wouldn't be good. We've looked at places such as the old Harmon's building on 2nd Street. That building, for example, has been broken into 71 times in the last 2 months, stealing copper. You have something there that can generate, the way their city is set up, it would generate homeless camps. We will not allow that, and we don't do that. We're not a handout, we're a hand up. Now, you've got to understand with our philosophy with that, we've been working with the church the last 8 months to get involved with us as well, because they see the hand up. Now, we're doing this with no expectation of return. I'm not doing it saying, give me money. I'm not making any money. We're making it, we ask, and we started this a year and a half ago, we ask a $5 donation if you have it. Is what that means is, well, we don't have grant writers, and every other food bank and every other church has grant writers or tithing. We don't. But we did find that middle class has been told no so many times that they really, really felt negative about going and getting help. And if all of you know, if you've got a bill to pay, somebody goes hungry, and that's not really good for the kids or the parents' mental health. There's only one thing in life, well, two things really. You're going to be born and be died. Everybody has that to match. There's only one other thing in everybody in this room and everybody's life is we're going to be hungry. And if somebody gets hungry enough and they don't have help, they're going to go out and commit crime. They're going to beat their wife. They're going to beat their kids. They're going to have issues that we don't have. If you look at the state statistics on domestic violence versus others, we're down because we're taking care of our people's needs. If not one person showed up Friday and not one person showed up next Friday, I would be the happiest person on earth. That would mean that somebody's doing something right. But until that happens, they need help. And I'll do whatever I have to do to help them. I don't want to leave North Ogden because it is a great community. And I know there's things I can do. We've shown that we can do a nonprofit ran by business and make it achievable. There's some things that needs to get fixed. We did have a business license. If we don't, I don't know why. He has the paper in the computer that I pulled up, our 501c3, and all the information's on it. Why it wasn't renewed, nobody told me. I didn't know it was renewed. I didn't know it wasn't, to be quite honest. I know that right after we did the site plan, we canceled it because that was for the body armor organization. We got rid of it because we started helping others. My son lives in the red house down in the basement, and I maintain an office upstairs so that I can get away and use the phone.
Mike, I think, to clarify, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the council, but I don't think anybody wants to have you leave the city, because I think we all recognize, and it's amazing, it's been 5 years since you and I sat down, and
It's unbelievable. 5 years and 10
Yeah.
days.
I think we started with Associated giving you a lot of food. Hopefully they still are.
Yes.
And so I think the purpose is good. I'm wondering, because I remember when I met with Mike, we knew these violations were there, and I think the conversation was, let's work together to solve these.
Yes.
Nobody we're not going to come down and force you out, but let's work on getting these things done. So perhaps what we could do, if it's all right with the council, it's your call, is have Mike, Scott's identified, I think, some violations. Mike's concerned that maybe some of those aren't quite accurate. So maybe what we could do is sit down and put together an actual plan with timelines on what can be done to get in compliance. Chief, maybe you could work with Mike and see if there's any additional safety things we can, because I think as Councilmember Watson brought up, and as we're hearing from the public mostly, it's the safety issue on the street.
Right.
I'm not smart enough to have an answer to that, but maybe you
I
two,
absolutely know. We've been
Yeah,
trying
maybe-
to make small adjustments to go.
maybe you two could work together on a safety plan and
I'd
on a plan to progress to get in compliance as that, to try to work together, because I think, as Mike said, it's kind of been a two-way street. Nobody's asked, no one said, right? And so now if we work together to come up with a plan with some timeframes
Absolutely.
and start
I like
maybe
to-
with the first one being the biggest issue, I think, that's been brought up to the council is, how can we make it safe? Mike's indicated they've done some things, but maybe there's some additional things that we can do to increase the safety. Would that be acceptable to the council? Mike, does that work for you?
Absolutely. You know,
Okay.
I'm not set in stone in any way, shape or form. I just want everybody to keep in mind that there's a possibility we're moving to a bigger place and bringing other business in. So I don't want to have you say, well, I want you to spend $400,000 on infrastructure and then another 600 on parking lot.
And then
Well, we
move.
might not even be there.
Yeah, I think that would be
So-
good to whoever, John, who would Mike work with? Scott?
Scott, yeah.
I talked
And,
to John about it once when we. had that.
Maybe, I know it's a confidential thing, but maybe you could work with them because you're right. If there's a high probability that you're going to move, there's no use putting a bunch of money into that. But I think just like with the basin, we just need to know how high a probability that is.
Right.
So could we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
My
let's-
door's open. My number hasn't changed in 5 years. I know a lot of the employees, the people that I used to work with here aren't here. And that is probably some of the issues. But my number is still there and it's open 24 hours a day to give me a call. I will do anything I can for our community. That's why I'm here. 10 years ago, if somebody would have said, hey, you're making $4 million a year with your company, you're going to shut it down and open a grocery store and forget to put in a cash register, I would have told them they're freaking nuts. You know, that's never what I had thought. But that night that happened, the guy upstairs wouldn't let me sleep. And we've ran into obstacles, the property being taken, et cetera, and we fixed them and we've overcome them. I think that it's, you know, been maybe the guy upstairs said I need to learn some stuff. Maybe today we need to learn some stuff. We're getting ready to, like I said, step it up and make it is real. But if we get into the new building, it's a whole new game. We can help people in a different level, in a different way. And it'll make my life easy. I haven't been on a vacation or anything in 5 years. It's been here every day because I have to pay the bills. But to give you an example of where we grew from, the first day we opened, we went over to Associated to pick up some food and we was going to get 2 pallets of foods. And we got there and they're like, what do you mean you just came? Well, a donation was being given to somebody in Idaho and it was like 20 hot dog packages and they thought they were us. So they gave them the 2 pallets of food. We got back to the place and I had all the media from the state and they're like, hey, you're going to look stupid. We better just, you know, cancel this to another time. And then the Badgers, the owners of Lee's, showed up with 11 pickup trucks. They're like, this is all of our food from up in Logan and here for the last week. We're giving it to you while media was there. It's like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to do this. So from going from a little tiny place, we originally had pallets stacked up, brick stacked with a tarp over them for our shelves. And there was more shelves than there was food. Last year, we gave 16 million pounds of food away that we made sure didn't go to the landfill. I'm working with Congress and Senate back in DC, putting program in place now to offer larger tax cuts to or advantages to the food outlets such as Associated and US Food to give their short dates to the food banks instead of putting them in a warehouse and rotting it. Right now, a lot of our food started getting sold to people like NPS, et cetera, at pennies on the dollar. If what we're working on with Congress goes through, then they'll get to write off 111% on their foods donated. So we're working on ways to rescue foods. If that happens, that's almost 400 million pounds of food nationwide per year. So we got some cool things. We did make some changes this year in legislation in Utah for food insecurities. So it's really neat. Now, we probably will never have huge state or federal funding because we help everybody. Most food banks will only allow 100% below poverty line to come in and get something. And they offer it as here's a box of food, go on your way. And if you go to any of those, go to Salvation Army every other Friday at 2:00 and drive down the road, you'll see boxes of food on the ground because they'll give them 5 things of Velveeta cheese or things that they're not going to use. And they just take what they want and throw the rest on the ground. You don't see that in our neighborhood because we offer them something and say, if you like it, take it. If not, leave it. During the weekdays, Tuesday, Wednesdays, when we shop with the nutritionalist and families, they shop off the shelves just like a grocery store, and we help them based on their family size, their ages, and their nutritional needs, including hygiene and diapers. So we're a little different, but because we help anybody that needs the help, that bars us from some of the state or federal funding because it's earmarked for poverty. And that's okay. Our budget right now, I'm just gonna be straight honest with you, we bring in about $6,000 a month when we ask for a $5 donation, and we pay our budget's about $16,000 a month. A large portion of that is in the summer is our diesel fuel. Our reefers run on diesel. And if we have two running, which we've now been able to narrow it down and work with our suppliers, that we go pick up our cold the morning of our giveaway. So we don't have to pay the cooling costs and the freezing costs of the food we give away on Fridays. And they deep freeze it super deep to us, and we can make it through the day and be good. We've never had a violation with health departments or with the Department of Agriculture, state, federal, or city. This is the first time we've been called to anything for anything, and I'm happy to work with you. Let's make this a community of fun. The more our citizens and our elderly, I mean, come on, our government says, no, you're old, you make $33,000 a year, you don't qualify for anything. They built our country. Our elderly, our grandparents and our parents built our country. We owe it to them to say, are you hungry? What can I give you? You know, I have one elderly lady that when we do drop stuff off, she'll come out, and if she has a box of Pop-Tarts, which she usually does, she'll take one package out and say, will you give this to somebody that needs it? And she feels like she is a part of our program and helping others. It's the neatest thing you ever see. You ever want to get more thank yous than you've ever had in your entire lifetime put together, come volunteer one Friday. You can volunteer 2 hours, and you will see what the program actually is and what we really do. It's a lot. I'm sometimes there 20 hours a day. My wife, she never gets to sleep, so just ignore, if she looks tired. And I apologize the way I look today. I just finished unloading a truck. Now, if you see me, I just wanted to mention, it doesn't mean nothing. But if you see me look like I'm shaking and making weird noises, I'm not a tweaker. I have Parkinson's. So I apologize for that, but you'll hear me make weird noises all the time. It's part of life, just like helping somebody. So thank you.
Mike,
I
thanks
appreciate
for
you.
what you do for the community, and Scott will be in contact with you. Let's see if we can't get a plan together to move forward. And then also, if you would engage with Scott and John on a confidential basis on your plans. Nobody wants to waste resources. So thank you for what you do.
Appreciate you
And,
guys. I hope I answered your questions.
Yeah, I
The
know when
only
we
big
met.
ones were, we do have a license, or we did. If we don't, I didn't know that happened.
Yeah.
I know that he printed 12 pages and it was in there. Our 501c3 was in there as well. We work on our 501c3. It takes years to get one for yourself. We work as Charities Anywhere Foundation / Tri-City Exchange. That is who we're with at this point. We're in the middle of finishing. There's a local charity that's here in our city that's been activated and never used. We're working with the IRS to take that over, which will save another year. And very, very soon, it'll just be Tri-City Exchange. But we are legal in every aspect from every permit. The only one that I now know that I don't have is a business license from you guys. But there is no advanced armor. The windows say that still, because that is if you know how back of a pickup truck, et cetera, they have that dots that you can see through and it keeps the sun out. That window that says advanced armor is a window shade. We shut down, it says closed, but that is the window shade for my office. As you know, every Christmas, we have the fire department bring Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and we turn the front room into Santa's workshop. We got some big things. The county said that we were one of the best Santa's workshops in our county this year. So it's all about the kids and all about letting somebody go to bed with their belly full. So
Thank you for what you
thank
do.
you guys. I appreciate it.
Mike. Yeah, I'm thinking back 5 years ago, never imagined that it would be like it is. So
I know
a
we
good
all
thing.
thought 3 months and we're going back to our own jobs.
Well, it's worked out. So Scott will work with you and we'll get a plan. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now. I think Scott Hess is also going to direct our next discussion, which is a recommendation on code enforcement policy from city staff. So
All right, hold on 1 minute.
and Scott, let's start with the safety plan if we can. I think that's what's brought the issue to the attention of the council. So let's work on that. Okay, Scott, do you want to talk to us about the code enforcement policy recommendation?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd say like, well, the planning department is a hub and spoke of code enforcement. There's a lot in Title 11 in the land use code that we deal with that is a code enforcement issue, but we aren't the drivers of code enforcement. So we were asked, or rather I was asked to pull together code enforcement. And what we did is we pulled several departments together. So the planning department, building department, business licensing, and the police department together to discuss what our current code enforcement issues are at a citywide kind of global level, and then help come together with some staff recommended new processes or procedures. So we have a relatively new chief, Chief Einen with us. And when I started, we had Chief Quinney. And at that time, it was Chief Quinney's request to department heads and to city staff that the city staff's responsibility was not to give work to code enforcement officers. You know, because I drive around and I know that accessory buildings need to be at least 6 feet away from a primary dwelling. And you can stand on almost any corner and point to several like Tough Sheds or Rubbermaid sheds or Lifetime sheds that are put right up against homes. And those are all essentially code enforcement issues. So I try to drive to the sites that I review with blinders on in some ways, because we've been asked as staff to not call them out, and we could spend all day long doing that. We could go out. One of the questions that we ask new planning commission members, and I don't know if the city council has asked this, is do you have any current code enforcement issues on your property? And the answer should always be, not that I'm aware of, but it's almost inevitably yes. Like we all do. There's a lot of code, and we don't expect the citizens to read and understand nearly 200 pages of the land use code, not to mention the remainder of the city code. So we are a reactive, you know, and I would welcome Chief Einen to come up and help me with this at any point, but we are a reactive code enforcement city, meaning that it requires a call into Weber Dispatch. That call into Weber Dispatch puts a proper case number to it with specific information. You can call without yourself being identified, so you can have it anonymous. But to make the call, you need to have enough information about the case that you really need to be near it and or affected by it. Like I can't just call the Weber Dispatch and put in code enforcement issues. So what I would say is we are reactive. There are several issues that we're currently dealing with that are a code enforcement issue. I don't want to read through everything. You've had the staff report sitting in front of you. But I will go through quickly the recommended new processes or procedures that come from staff. One is we have a software called iWork that is used at Public Works, the building department, the planning department, and it is how we receive all applications. We're essentially a paper-free city now. Everything is electronic, and we do inspections on iWork, and it has a software portal that was used last in 2019 specifically for code enforcement. And I think that was around the time when Chief Quinney made the decision that community service officers and Weber County Dispatch were going to be the primary method for how they were given work through code enforcement. So already, Bryce Nelson, who does several jobs for us and kind of operates in an IT capacity, has given access to police department, Jason Child, Mark Semperot, Sarah May, and Genesis Orlando to iWork. In addition to, I have access to iWork. We'd like to begin using that again as a way to do either proactive code enforcement or recognize code enforcement issues that come from other departments. The other thing we had talked about is code enforcement is a process that's very specific. You have a letter that is given out to the property owner as the first touch base. There's a specific time frame that comes with that. If they don't comply within that time frame, they can be fined and or a court date set, and then they have to show up in court and they run through the whole process. So something that would speed up this from the building department, planning department, and certainly business licensing department is align our first departmental letters with the code enforcement letters so that it can be the first formal touch base. I think that would save weeks between us sending a letter and somebody not doing anything, like on a business operating without a business license or a property owner's property that has deleterious materials, junk, large weeds, whatever. If I send a letter, it's not that proper first notice. But if we can align those and make sure that it is, then we will help with the first touch base from code enforcement. Once that letter is sent, either the code enforcement officers, the department of personnel will call dispatch and get a case number assessed to the case. So iWork becomes like a portal to put in for proactive code enforcement. And then the department member would send the iWork case to the code enforcement folks to like finalize the process, kind of circle the wagons and make sure iWork recognizes the case load and that the code enforcement officers are referencing the correct iWork number. So this would be, and it's a question for the council and police chief, is do we want to allow department members of various departments or code enforcement staff to begin doing more proactive code enforcement, which has up to date been pretty reactive. The next is, we had a recommendation that our fees as they're assessed, maybe we have a citizen group or a committee rather than city council, or consider what the fees should be assessed on various code enforcement issues. Some of them are misdemeanors. Some are like the business licensing fees are developed in our fee schedule. But should the city council remove any call outs to define time or fees and fines in the code and use a general language so that staff can administratively assess that time to comply and fees, fines to issues? Like, Tri-City Exchange is a great example. We know there are several code enforcement issues on the property, and the council has asked them to work with planning department, which we're certainly willing to do, but there's no real time defined there, right? Is that 3 months, 6 months, the next year? It's been going on for 5 years. So I just, we would prefer the guidance on what the council would like to do and or let staff set that time frame. I will give you 6 months until X happens. And then establish semi-annual or quarterly code enforcement priorities for staff to focus on. It kind of ebbs and flows between all of the responsibilities that code enforcement personnel do. We could potentially assign internally within departments who helps take code enforcement calls, because right now, if I take a code enforcement call, I just recommend that property owner, I give them the phone number, I say, call Weber Dispatch, you've got to put this in through the proper channels, but after that, touch base, I don't hear from them again, and I don't chase it down. And then, of course, aligning iWork with the standard caseload so that code enforcement cases and iWork issues run together. The real impact to this is that there's a budget impact. And I think that to do code enforcement proactively, what we really need is at least one more community service officer. And I say that as the community and economic development director who is not over the community service officer. So I'll let police chief back that up. And that is a real cost to the city. That's something to consider. It's a full-time position with benefits and would be a significant cost. 4 would even be more helpful to meet the needs that we have if we really want to do proactive code enforcement. Right now we have 2 code enforcement officers or community service officers, and any amount of additional proactive code enforcement could mean additional code enforcement officers. And just to give you the list of items that the code enforcement staff currently work on, and I've lost in my list where it is. They are responsible for animal control, evidence destruction and maintenance, speed trailers, vacation checks on properties. They are backup front desk folks when necessary and backup crossing guards when necessary. So that's, 6 kind of full-time responsibilities for 2 people whose work ebbs and flows. So sometimes they're working full-time on animal control, sometimes they're working full-time on evidence, other times they're working full-time on actual code enforcement calls that have come in, but there's only so many work hours in a day for any of those items. The list of problematic code enforcement issues on page 3, each one of those bullet points actually has a specific property or more than one specific property, but for the protection of those folks, we kind of scrubbed that out. But generally, these are the types of things that we're dealing with, and in some cases, they are very specific ones that are known by the city that may not have had a code enforcement call on. So staff is familiar with them, but we don't really know what to do with that information.
Scott, quick question. The animal fowl code number that somebody gave previously is different than this one that's on here.
Yeah.
Just curious did the one that they state is out of date, or maybe this one that's on the report is out of date?
So
Like 11-9M-10, and then the person that came up said it's 14-1-10. Just curious.
So you can think of the city code in 2 ways. You got all of the city code, which is like your parking and your enforcement and weeds and nuisances. And then you have the state land use code that regulates zoning. And the 2 are mirrored between 11-14, and I have it written down. So I'll tell you exactly what the code references are. 11-9M-10-D1 is within the Title 11 Land Use Code, and that references 25 feet in one location. And it was likely a missed reference because everywhere else references 75 feet to the nearest dwelling. And that code is mirrored in the city code 14-11-10E1, which has the exact same reference to 25 feet in the same exact location. My effort as planning director is like the tie goes to the runner. So if there is a less restrictive code, that's typically the one that I've given, mostly because I want to keep the city from being sued. But incorrect references happen and we need to correct them. The Title 14 one is very easy. The city council could put that on an agenda and change it immediately. The Title 11 has a specific process through state code where it's publicly noticed, has a planning commission public hearing recommendation, and then city council. So as the council, you can decide what direction that goes, or we could align those 2 things. So we hold the Title 11 public hearing, and then when we come forward, we correct Title 11 and Title 14 in the same meeting would likely be, I think, a good or fair way to do that, because then the public will have had an opportunity to weigh in on the changes in Title 11. So sorry, that was a total, like a diversion, but it's also within the same realm of issues that we're dealing with. So council, I guess I pose the question to you, what would you like us to do? How proactive with code enforcement do you want us to be? And, second question is, we are in the budget season right now, so this would be the time for consideration in the budget of, do we hire another CSO or not?
I have a question. If we didn't change anything of the way we've been enforcing code and we stayed reactive code enforcement, then would you still recommend that we need another CSO?
I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
So regardless, if we need a new CSO, then it's a budget question, but it's needed anyway. To me, it's like we need a CSO or we need a CSO. But my personal opinion is, it might not be realistic to go chase everyone down, but if we're aware of anything that's safety concerns, then we should pursue those and not wait for the dispatch to have something. And if you need the council's go ahead on that, then I think safety, we could vote on that right now. You know what I'm saying? If it's safety related, then don't wait for the dispatch call.
I think the biggest thing is fire life safety. I think was what we talked about. And I think that's kind of the criteria I think we decided on as council. I don't want to speak for everybody, but we talked about that at work session. I think that was kind of the key thing is if there's something like that, not like a flagpole that is not code compliant, okay, skip over that one, skip over the one that fence is 2 inches across, you know, I think what was one of them, our evergreens of a fence or, you know, whatever. I mean, I understand that's important to some people, but I think the enforcement of certain code has to be efficient and at the same time budget conscious, because if we could, like you said, you could hire 4 people and it could be great, you know, everybody's towing the line. I mean, do you want to live in a city like that where you're like, did I just violate a code? Not really. But I think at the same time, you want to make sure that you don't just have code written and then, oops, you know, anyway, if it's in the code and we're not enforcing, why is it in the code? I mean, that's kind of one of my things. So.
And there's times, and I guess I'll just say this from the planning department, and is that there are times that it's in the code because it's to help when it's a really egregious issue. That we don't go out and we measure everybody's front lawn and weeds to make sure it's 6 inches. But when the thistles and the weeds have grown 4 feet tall and it's becoming a major issue and growing over sidewalks, we have a code to lean back on. And you have to choose a reasonable number of, you now must mow your lawn down, your yard down to X number. The other one is on fire life safety. The building department luckily has those police powers. Zoning is technically a police power that, you know, came out of all the 1920s tenement housing and terrible things. We don't deal with a whole lot of that anymore. But the building official has fire life safety powers to red tag buildings, shut things down. They don't have to follow the code enforcement process because they don't want buildings falling down and hurting and or killing people. Same with the engineering department in tall retaining walls. You know, they get to just go out and enforce based on life safety issues. Planning department a little bit less, business licensing certainly less, unless it's something really scary like someone, I don't know, you know, dealing with chemicals or something like that. They might be able to go and shut down a business, but for the most part, planning and business licensing, we have to follow the code enforcement process.
Just real quick too, I think it's part of the process of improving code enforcement and communication. We want to institute a process where we can prioritize the bigger problems that are life and safety, not just blight and things like that, but they can make it on the list as well. And so we'll work together in a quarterly meeting where we have a list of properties, maybe 1 through 10, or places that we need to pay attention to that are focused on life and safety. And we impact those with the extra CSO or more enforcement that way.
I'm curious if there's going to be a process of, let's say there is some kind of fire life safety issue and calls are made, but nothing happens. Like, what's the process moving forward then, right?
Yeah. I can't think of any that I've seen in the last 4 years. I know of several building permits that we've tracked down and red tagged for fire life safety issues. And we've had the fire department come out and do inspections of properties when we are concerned with those. We do have a few homes that accumulate a lot of material around them that might be, you know, a fire hazard, but we deal with them and they clean themselves up, and then we deal with them and they clean up. And so it's kind of a, you know, roller coaster with a few of these properties and property owners. But I would say the majority of anything that's a serious fire life safety issue always is dealt with right up front. And that's been my experience the last 4 years.
And on that note, with my other position, I get called all the time of fire hazards because that's the quickest way to get somebody to come look at it, is it's a fire hazard is what they think. We go and look at them, but there's a lot of times where I won't do anything because what I consider a fire hazard, somebody else doesn't. And if I don't consider it, when I'm not calling the community resource officers to come help me fix it. But we try to relay that to the complainant too, but it happens a lot. People call for life or fire and life safety hazards because they want something fixed.
Councilmember Poor.
So were you asking a question about whether to do the iWorks? Because that just seems like a good thing to do. And I think all of the information that you just said, I think is awesome. I think can it be implemented without doing the extra CSO? I guess that's the question. If the questions can't, then we need to go figure it out. But if it can, or at least part of it, meaning the prioritization, like you said, 1 through 10, go attack those, so to speak, or definitely, I think using iWorks and not delegating, but authorizing certain people to get the process flow going, I think is going to help enormously because, you can only rely on snitches so long, and then, then you have to do some. I think the city should be doing some of its own work itself. It's true. The mayor said it, snitches. So that's what you said. Reactive snitches.
Councilmember Pulver, I think that, I don't know that we need council staff to tell us whether or not to use iWork. I think that'll be a kind of a department to department discussion. And the helpful part would be raising awareness on properties, whether or not that brings enforcement action any sooner and or, changes their caseload. I can't answer that question. If anything, I think it would just put more in the hopper, and then the CSOs would have to filter through them to determine what are the most important priorities. But we can use, iWork is a tool that we have and use across multiple platforms. So at minimum, it's one that I think we can utilize and maximize.
Does the city already receive from dispatch a report of how many code complaints were called in per month, per quarter, or is that hard to get, Chief Einan?
No, we run it through Spillman, so it could be complaints through dispatch, that would count, as well as on view, where a CSO officer sees something and it's self-initiated. Any report that's related to code enforcement will, if there's a report on it, we can track it. That's where we get the data. It's not from dispatch. As far as complaints, we also have the radio generated calls, which could be the same as well. So we take those two numbers and we put them together, and we're able to find out how many calls for service related to code enforcement we have. And then based on that, how many reports were taken, how many violations were observed, how many citations were written, and the case status from there.
Right.
And I think one thing needs to be mentioned about, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I think we have to look at, as far as another code enforcement officer, that gives them, having another person there gives us the ability to do self-initiated work, to drive around the city and look to see if there are any violations, especially safety issues, and to observe and or address complaints right away. Gives them the opportunity to be on the street a little bit more, just like a police officer. Thank you.
And I think the biggest thing is that we're not going to get less complaints per year as we go forward. Right. Yeah. And so and I think you said that last year, and I think you said we need 2. And so we're down to 1. I think that's
John, I neglected to say this, but Jason Child in the police department helped us prepare a short presentation. And
Yeah, I
that was
saw it.
part of the staff report, but we haven't shown it to the public. But the total CSO calls for service have increased rapidly year over year. So it was 166 in 2021, 367 in 22, 837 in 23, 697 in 24, and same, the code enforcement issues that we have dealt with, the calls have increased kind of at a similar rate with those. And then the next one is the violations versus the citations, and those went down. Citations went down in number in 2024 versus 23, and violations went down slightly in 2024 versus 23. But I just wanted to make sure that his work that he had was shown and referenced. So the 2 officers in 2024 wrote 764 CSO reports. Divide that by 2080 hours or the number of days they work, and it's significant workload.
That was up about 300 from year to year, 2023 to 2024.
So John and Scott, what what information do you need the council? What are you looking for them to give you direction?
I think that internally we can do some things to help be a little bit more proactive on code enforcement. And I think that will come down to the police chief's recommendation to department heads on how proactive we are. We're always very proactive on fire life safety. So I do want to reiterate that. And then the other piece is this is really information being brought to the council during pre-budget time for your consideration on what level of code enforcement do you want the city to do as we prepare our budgets. And if there is another position in the police department budget for a CSO, this is the basis for that, that why.
John, in this budget you gave me, is there an extra CSO in there based upon the request or not?
Not currently.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Watson.
Do you feel like you hold business owners to a different level of standard than just a homeowner as far as following code? Do you, I guess what I'm saying is, if every other house, let's say on a street has a shed next to their house, a code enforcement officer may not even notice those or see those or ever drive on that street. But the businesses kind of are highlighted in our city and, they have the privilege to be serving our city. And I wonder if it's harder to kind of turn your head and ignore. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't really know what I'm asking, but is it something you already do, kind of hold them to the code enforcement? Or no, you wait for a dispatch call. So if there's that's I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, we wait for a dispatch call. I mean, there are several businesses that I know of that have current land use issues on them. And that's kind of everybody, again, you can walk the property and find a reason that they need code enforcement called on them. But if they are good neighbors and friendly and helpful to their neighbors and they don't receive code enforcement calls, we're not out tracking them down. I mean, I'm not out trying to give our 2 CSOs it doesn't work. And that's not my charge as the planning director to go out and find and discover places where they're misusing, not meeting the code. So I don't know that I would say we give them a pass and or that we're more proactive. But there are some issues because Washington Boulevard and 2600 North are both traveled heavily where we just receive more calls on those particular issues. So.
Councilmember Barker.
I actually do think we hold our businesses to a higher standard, and with my job specifically, I do go into every business almost every year. And fire and life safety is the #1 concern for a commercial business, is how to get people out in an emergency. So we address those yearly. Aesthetics, I don't care about. But that might be where we have code issues, but that's not a life safety issue. But all of our businesses should be pretty well. We do check those as a fire department. I mean, our crews are going through multiple businesses every year, or the same business multiple times a year to make sure that they are safe.
Checking for hazards.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
And on fire life safety issues, we have held up dozens of building permits that don't have egress doors with landing, concrete landing pads as required by building code. And it can be really difficult to look somebody in the face and say you're going to lose your rate lock because your concrete person didn't pour the right concrete in the right spot at the right time, but we have held them to it. So fire life safety is a huge, it's a huge deal, #1 priority.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pulver.
So, and I guess this kind of, I think we're talking about this, but because we're code enforcement as well, I think this kind of dovetails into business license where we kind of, instead of a flat rate, if your business is something that the police or, fire department do a lot of enforcing, I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because if you're just make up something, popsicle stand versus a business that has a lot of throughput and has a lot of issues that come along. And I think that's something that I think people understand what I'm saying with certain businesses and if you have, apartment complexes are going to have more issues than single-family houses, or business in a single-family house. Just something to think about. I know there's other cities that have a pretty extensive dichotomy of what they charge per year for business license, depending on what your business is, because the soft infrastructure cost of what it takes to keep them safe. Anyway, something to think about.
I think there's another issue too. I sent John an article the other day where I think it's Draper City's getting sued, right? Because they let homes be built on fill, basically. And so they go right after the cities, right? So I think, code enforcement also involves protection of liability for the city. If something major happens and it's a code violation, and particularly if the city knew about it and didn't do anything, it exposes the city to liability. And I believe that was Draper, wasn't it, Scott, where those houses fell off they filled a ravine and so I think you've got to look at it from that aspect too of protecting the citizens that way in addition to safety, because if insurance never stays the same if you have a big claim. So what else what direction specifically are you looking for from the council so we can make sure we address that tonight? You're requesting, you're wanting the city to consider one additional CSO. Is that correct in the budget process?
I thought they said 4 or something. I know.
That was in their perfect world.
I know.
Yeah, we started for 2.
At least one request for 2, I think is what I heard in the budget process. What else specifically, Scott, are you looking for tonight?
I think the other would be support from the council on doing proactive code enforcement. We see it, and again, I don't want to give our CSOs work unless the police chief has said, department heads, as you're out and cruising around the city, if you see something egregious, if you see something that's beyond, then let's bring that forward. But I have a hard time not applying the code consistently. So if I see one that I feel like is really bad, but somebody else might not, I pretty well leave it alone. So maybe from the council, whether it's support or encouragement or yes or no, should we be doing more proactive code enforcement when we're out? I think that direction would be interesting and helpful to hear.
I am a yes on proactive. So as long as it doesn't create this huge burden of extra workload, I struggle with the only way of things being addressed is by having a snitch call in.
It's not air quotes. No, it's a snitch.
It's well,
no air quotes on that.
No, it's a quote because you say it all
you're
the time. So I'm quoting you. But that is the only way to get anything addressed is to call someone in to code enforcement, as opposed to it would be nice if some things were just addressed. The more egregious things, to your point, all the tough sheds that you see or all the lifetime sheds that you see on properties. I mean, that seems like that's a losing battle to start going after each and every one of those. But if you see things that are just, completely out there and are just maybe very visibly unpleasing or whatever, then go after those. But I just worry that it will create this huge additional workload. So maybe it got to think of ways to keep it under control.
So Scott, if maybe I heard you incorrectly, but the definition of egregious is different here. So if we're going to empower the department heads to pursue, quote, whatever's egregious, then we need to support them, because there's nothing worse than them trying to enforce the code and then the council saying, oh, no, King's X, we don't want to do that. So if we're going to grant authority to the department heads to pursue that, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but that's maybe what you're looking for is if we're going to grant that authority, then let it be.
And support the staff, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, which is, so I guess the question, council, are you willing to grant that authority to the respective department heads, knowing that, life safety is at the top of the deal. And, obviously, we all probably get calls on code violation. Those will still be looked at us if they're called in, but I guess they're asking for that. Are you willing to do that?
Yes, as long as I can get my flagpole waved. Anyway.
They're probably not going to pick on your flagpole. It's not a life safety issue. Councilmember Watson?
I mean, I think there's a difference in, having all the officers drive up and down every single street looking versus if we know of something that is egregious and we are just letting the staff, like telling the staff to ignore it when it's a major problem, they already know about it and they're being told to ignore it. That seems like there's a problem there. If they know about a problem, they should have the permission to go solve it, I think.
So what that would mean is, as a legislative body, you set the ordinances and then you let them enforce them. We don't get involved in the enforcement action. That's their responsibility. We just legislative set the ordinances and let them, and if, we consistently get calls, we pass that on to them so that they can focus on that. Councilmember
And
Dowpass?
to paint the picture to what I think the mayor is explaining, I want to paint the picture that you might have a situation where staff proactively goes to a property, says, hey, you got problems here, here, and here, work on those. And then you might have a resident that comes fuming mad to a city council meeting and and maybe they bring some neighbors because they all don't agree with the assessment or something. That's the very situation that the mayor's saying we need to have the backup of staff, because there will be times where people come mad at us because we are allowing our staff to go look for these things. So I'm just trying to paint that picture that will happen from time to time.
And that,
They ought to paint.
yeah, and that's fine.
Last week.
I think the boundary does need to include consistent application, because that's where people really get upset, right? So I think the message from the council would be, yes, you've been granted that authority, but we expect consistent application, because that's where people really get. And frankly, if somebody comes, I think the council's job then would be to assess the ordinance. Does it make sense? Because we've talked many times, if it doesn't make sense, let's get it off the books or modify it. And that's, I think, where the council, if residents come, that becomes the council's authority legislatively. Do they want to eliminate that ordinance or change it? But if it's a good ordinance and the council believes, then we have to make sure we're backing staff in their application. John?
And with that, Mayor, and your comment, I think is on point, because I think that one of the tasks for the CSO moving forward will be, here's the ordinances that are unenforceable, that are used basically as weapons by neighbors against each other. So here's the amendments. And I wouldn't say you're going to get one every council meeting, but I would expect that over the next year, they'll come back with some that say, hey, here's an ordinance that is impossible to enforce. Everyone violates it. JD mentioned the tough sheds, maybe that's one that we need to make it so it's not a violation because no one really objects to it. It's just something that the neighbors use as a reason to complain because someone plays their music too loud or something. So that's something that'll be part of this process over the next year as well, I would anticipate.
Councilmember Watson?
Well, I guess I was under the impression that we would need 4 CSOs if we were going to go after every household. And we're not going that far, right? This is more of a top level emergency egregious type of level, right? That's my opinion. So.
Yeah, understand that each department head may define egregious differently, but if we grant them that authority, then it's making sure we got the right people, right bus, right seat, right? So I'm sure the department heads, I know they have staff meeting and they can coordinate to make sure there's some consistency in that situation.
And I just wanted to say, we're so early in the budgeting process that it sounds great. Let's add a CSO officer. But my experience has shown over the past 3 years, every budget, we get more gotchas until it's time to have a truth and taxation meeting. And so, I don't want to say, yeah, this is a slam dunk. Let's add it to the budget. Let's move forward at all costs. Because I get the feeling that this budget year is just going to be very challenging.
Yeah. I think that's a correct statement.
So we can add it to the budget now as a
Hmm.
request and something that we want to do, but I don't know that we're going to feel that it's a slam dunk in 2 months, but hopefully it is.
Yeah, I think it's just a request for consideration. So, okay, does that answer? Then the council appears to grant that authority to department heads and stay on the legislative side of the issues. But as John pointed out, it would be nice for the department heads to bring to the council legislative matters that need to be changed, that are just burdensome and don't have an end result. But you can see in some of the surrounding cities who don't have some of the ordinances we have, that it's becomes more difficult to keep the city up to the standard that people of North Ogden are expecting. So I think we've got to keep that in mind too, that, you can't enforce the aesthetics because it's different to everybody, but there are certain things that will keep our city beautiful. So, okay. Does that answer your question? You okay with that, council? All right. Perfect. Let's move on then to budget. Speaking of budget, let's move on. I think we're going to hear from Mr. Call and lead that discussion on the enterprise funds, the motor pool, and Parks and Recreation. Is that correct?
Yes, and Dave will do most of the heavy lifting as per usual. But council, I did send out today, and we will make it available online, the current worksheet that you're typically used to seeing. I did send out the yellow sheets because the worksheet wasn't quite ready, and I felt like it was good for the council to have information. But next week or the next meeting, the yellow sheets for the admin and police and things like that, we won't send out. It'll be the budget worksheet amendments as we've talked about. So Dave has some highlights for each of the departments. Just as a reminder, the Citizens Budget Committee has gone through the yellow sheets. Councilman Pulver's there. And at the beginning of each of these discussions, we do want to allow them to provide a presentation to the council with some of the recommendations they've had. So they talked about these sheets 2 weeks ago, and they've got some recommendations for you tonight. And then Dave can go through some of the highlights for the group or for the different departments that he's in charge of as the Public Works Director. So it'd probably be good to start with having the representative from the Citizen Budget Committee come up, if that's okay with the council.
Hear from Mr. Swanson.
Council, thank you for the opportunity to, one, be on the committee, and second, to address you tonight. We have just some general recommendations that we'd like to forward on to you for your discussion and consideration as you look at the budget moving forward. Some of the recommendations are intended not so much to influence the budget, but some of it is to make it easier for the average citizen to understand what's happening with the budget and to recognize the ins and the outs of the budgeting. The first thing we have, and I believe you all have a copy of this list there so you can read along, are regarding training fees. One of the discussion items that we had in one of our recent meetings was that where the city is paying $1,000 or more for training of an individual within the city, it may be beneficial to the city, especially as the labor market for these employees tightens, that we ask some kind of contractual obligation from the employee that it's 6 months of work commitment for the city to stay with the city for 6 months, 3 months, a year, whatever you feel that would be the most appropriate, but some kind of agreement or obligation from that employee so that we're not like we were in the years of old where we were the training grounds and folks would get their certifications and then move off to other cities, that we ask for some kind of commitment from them. in the yellow sheets and other budget information that where, especially where there are large expenditures that are offset by a revenue somewhere else. Most residents will look at the budget and they'll see just the expenditure side of things without realizing that there's an offsetting revenue. It might be helpful if we could get some notes put in some of the budgeting that would indicate that, yes, this is a $300 and something thousand expenditure, but there is this offsetting revenue. We don't have to raise taxes or anything like that to accomplish this revenue. This expenditure, because here's the revenue. It just makes it a little easier for the average citizen to take a look at the budget and understand what's going on. The year-end unspent budget. Every year, the departments, year after year after year, do a very good job of staying within or under their budgets, and that usually leaves us with a little bit of surplus at the end. Again, this is kind of a labeling thing, but is there a way to set aside or to label that surplus money in a way that reserves it for use in the budget the next year? It generally just goes back into the general fund and it's lumped in with all the other general fund. John, I can't remember the exact term that you used when I talked to you about this last week, but is there some way that we can make it clear to citizens that this is the money that's left over and here's what it's being used for, rather than just being thrown back into a lump pocket? May not be able to do that in a good way, but it's something to think about. A big one that has come up multiple times in our meetings thus far is the philosophy of pay for use within the community. We've talked about it over the recent years with regards to recreation. There's been a suggestion that we talk about it with snow plowing and similar things. We have, when I talk to our public works director, we probably have about a 2-to-1 plowing use up on the hill versus down in the flats. The question's been asked, should those that live up on the hill where you have to use more expensive equipment more often, should they in some way be paying more for the plowing service so that they're not subsidized by those down on the flats, where sometimes they don't have to be plowed at all and we've got 2 or 3 plows up on the hill that have to be going. But that needs to be a discussion that is system-wide. We can't just look at one. So it would apply to the senior center. It would apply to the aquatic center. It would apply to snow plowing, recreation. You would want to make sure that that philosophy is one that you're willing to implement across the board, but without just picking and choosing and saying we're going to do it here, but we're not going to do it here. There was some discussion. We've already got the answer on this, but it's here anyway. Police motor pool, investigate the use of the purchase of seized vehicles, similar to what the Department of Highway Patrol does. We've since learned that only the Highway Patrol can use those vehicles and they're not available for us to get. So you can just check that one off. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. Solid waste. The discussion has been, can we increase our scale and thereby reduce our costs if we combine with Pleasant View City? And look at exploring, when does their contract come up? I know ours is coming up fairly soon. Is there a way for us to combine services together, to bid together, and then get one service or get our services bid together and get a lower cost by coming together on that? Recycling, there's always the ask for recycling. I don't know how it can be done in a cost-efficient way, but there is a continued from a certain part of the population, not everybody, but a growing part of the population that wants recycling, curbside recycling to come back. So something to explore. It's hard to do in a tight budgetary season, and we're in one of those very tight seasons. So thank you for whatever discussions you can have for there. And then finally, roads. I alluded to this a little bit in my public comment early on. Right now we're about $110 million behind the 8 ball to get all of our roads up to 20. Was it a 20-year life, John?
Yep.
Up to a 20-year life, we need to spend about $110 million right now. While I feel I won't make commentary. That's not my point right here. We need to explore ways to increase the repair and maintenance of the roads that we have, whether that be a transportation utility fee, some other funding mechanism, but we have to find some way to do it. Many of the roads that we have, as was explained by our Public Works Director, are about to that point where we can no longer repair them, where we would have to do a full, not a mill and overlay, but a full rebuild, which would 10, 20 times the cost. So if we can find a way to, whether it's a transportation utility fee or something along the likes where we can increase funding, make it available so that we can get these roads that are right around that 4, 5, 6 year life left, where if they go any worse, we're going to have to completely rebuild the road. If we can salvage those roads with this funding, in the long run, we save literally millions of dollars. Those are the only recommendations that we have at this time for these departments. We'll be back for your next meeting with more recommendations on others. Any questions for me before I sit down? John?
In your opinion, do you feel like the Citizens Budget Committee is spending enough time on the yellow sheets in the meeting and outside, that you're getting into enough detail that
I do.
that you're combing through and helping eliminate concerns?
Yeah, that's my sense. One of the things that I've noticed in the meetings that we've had thus far is that early on, before our sessions really got into the meat of things and we got into the yellow sheets, there were a lot of questions that stemmed from a lack of understanding how things happen budgetarily within the city, how funding is, where do our road funds come from? How much do we have in road funds? How much do we need? What hasn't been done in decades in the past and that we're trying to catch up on and pay for now. So there's the yellow sheets are excellent. I would recommend them to any citizen who's trying to understand the budget more thoroughly. It really gives you a good in-depth. That's where the training suggestion that we had came up, was looking at nearly every department has training. And sometimes it's not a whole lot of money. Sometimes it's several $1,000s. One suggestion that, is administration tonight, John? I'm sorry. It's not. That's next time, right? That's next time. Yeah, there's some thoughts, for the administration that we'll have for you next time. But yes, in general, John, the answer to your question is they are very helpful, and I think the meetings have been very helpful. Mike, would you agree? Mike is one of our committee members. Sandy, back here. Brenda, you've been a citizen that's been paying attention. Feel like those yellow sheets help you understand better? Okay. Yeah. So there's the answer to your question. Any other questions?
Not a question per se, but I think one of the other things was depreciation, kind of identifying, like you were talking about the big ticket items, to identify, hey, we've saved $150,000 over the past 10 years during appreciation. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about overall too, is if we're depreciating assets, how are we tracking that? And if that's something that we can know that, hey, we're buying a snowplow this year, it's $300,000, but 200 is from, we already have quote saved because of depreciation. I think that's a less of a, like you said,
it's a little less shocking.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the other one was, to make, when we finally get a budget solidified, is to make a simple 2-page, literally a budget, a citizen budget
executive summary kind of thing.
Exactly. I think that's something I've seen in other cities that, especially when you do have big ticket items or if you have a tax increase, that really helps. And I think.
And the committee's happy to help you do that as you get to that point in the budget. And yes, Councilmember Dowpass.
I think I remember hearing this in one of the budget committees, but maybe you can talk to it. In my experience, we always have a problem where people think that the trucks that we purchase, for example, for some departments, a lot of them end up being a net zero where we lease them, but we have to put them on the books. So somebody will see $60,000 in expenses, but that expense ends up being a zero to the city because we sell it a year or two later for almost either the full price or very close to. It'd be awesome if we could get in our budget that address somewhere, or like a big asterisk that says, hey, this is not an actual expense that the city is taking on.
That was
Did
item
you guys
number
talk about
2.
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was item
that's
number
2.
2 that
Okay.
we have here, identifying those revenue streams. And that was one of the ones that was, for one of our newer members on the committee this year, was a concern. What do you mean we're buying, $30,000-$40,000 trucks every year? What they didn't realize is that we're getting that cost back from the dealer when we turn those vehicles in or we sell them out on the market. So it's a net zero. Sometimes it's a little bit of a positive for us. Once that was understood, then it made sense that we have these new vehicles that are under warranty, all of the reasons that Public Works originally went there. And so that little identifier, whether it's a little asterisk, a little side note or whatever, next to that expense, that this is offset by these revenues, it's a net zero. I think that will just help others understand the budget. Other questions? Mayor, any questions? Councilmember Barker?
Not right now.
Okay, Councilmember Watson? Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will turn it over to Dave and he can go through some of the highlights. Most of these were brought up with the subcommittee, but it's also good for the council to know some of them as well. So.
Thanks, Council. So, just like was said by both John and Bill, that the departments have been working really hard on those yellow sheets. They've, since January, they've had their hands on them. We're constantly adding to them, working on those sheets. And we've got to work with the Citizen Budget Committee and go line by line with those kind of things. So today I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the main ones, probably increases that will be coming to the budget that maybe are something different than you've seen from last year because, like Phil said, a training budget, it might be the exact same from last year to this year. And so these are just some of those highlights that we'll just talk about real quick. The first ones we'll start with Streets Department. So the Streets Department, are asking for a second message board. You guys know that we have already previously, about 3 years ago, purchased a messaging board. The thing is we constantly are having those out, trying to get messages out, construction, events, those kind of things. But a lot of times we're trying to get everybody to see it. So we typically go rent a second one, so that we're putting one maybe on 2700 and one down on 1700, or one, on the north side of the city. And so this is something that we've just seen that we have a need for a second one, and we are already renting them in the year. And so we anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 a year we're renting these things for. And so we just thought it'd be a good resource to get a second one. Another one long time coming was the parking lots. This is something that we have brought to councils before, but it's one of those things that was just, we have so much work to do on the roads that it's a very easy thing to say, you know what, we'll try to get that next year, and we'll try to, we feel like we've got a pretty good plan. And because of the 5-year plan that we've built over the last few years, this is something that we've been able to build into the CIP and really put into this 5-year plan. And so we'll be able to do Barker Park, Mountain View Park, and Oaklawn Park with that $120,000. Get those parking lots back up to a condition that is, without the potholes and all the problems there, and back to being striped and ready to go that way. Striping, we have striping increases. This is to the contractors that we use for all of our long lines. So those are all of the, our main roads that you see all the long lines on. We've seen increases of just for those kind of things. And we have a lot more crosswalks and the different things that we've put in place. And so we have an increase on that of $15,000. And then the second one is a striping machine that we can use internally, that we can use at parking lots. We can use to do curb painting. So if we have a red curb painting that, you know, we don't need to go reach out to a contractor. Those are some of the things that we feel like we can definitely do in-house, and would save us a lot of cost going towards striping. That is something that we feel like that would be very beneficial. How do you guys want me to go? You just want me to keep going and then we can go back and talk about certain ones, or do you want to stop at each department?
Well, I'd kind of like to highlight the ones that are coming out of CIP, because some of these, you know, these aren't an increase that holy cow we have to cover. They're coming out of CIP for some things like the striping, the bathrooms, you know, other stuff like that. I just want to make sure that that comes out now before people start.
And I can mention that as we go.
Yeah.
So the messaging board, the striping machine and the parking lots would all be coming out of CIP, and your striping increase would be out of the maintenance word. So we'll move on to parks. The Arbor Day event, we are just bringing that. And so what this is just getting moved. We used to, do it as part of the liaison that would help us with events. We're bringing this in-house and we're just doing it a different way. And so we've asked to do $10,000. This is just to do the event, all of the work that goes into the event. For instance, this year, we're going to be doing some pine trees there near Santa's house for the North Pole. So we'll be putting in permanent pine trees so that we're not constantly having to go buy pine trees that we will.
I know someone
throw
that's going to be
away.
very happy about that,
happy.
that has
So-
commented multiple
So
times
that's-
in
That's
meetings.
what we're doing this year's, and so that's what we were just trying to build onto there. A Ventrex snow machine, we actually purchased one last year. I think you guys remember. We did that in stormwater. It's saved us so many hours. This thing is a stand behind machine that is just a little smaller than the 4 feet sidewalks. And so we were able to knock out, like, for all of our detention basins, we're able to knock out all those sidewalks that we do the detention basins with very quickly. And so this is just something that the Parks Department, so that we can get the parks cleaned up, all of the sidewalks at the parks cleaned up. Not to mention the parks do the facilities for all of our buildings in the whole city. So they do City Hall, they do over here at the police station, Public Works, the rec building. And so that's just one of those things that we've found a very good use in this thing, and it has other attachments and different things that we can use actually in the summer as well for the Parks Department. It can pull pipe and different things. And so it would be a multi-use tool that we think it would be just a really good addition to the Parks Department. We have a Xeriscape project that we'd like to do at McGriff Park. McGriff is one of our oldest parks as far as our irrigation system goes. We still have the old brass heads. Constantly having to do repairs and different things. And so what we'd like to do is that whole stretch along 900, we would like to go to a Xeriscape where we can take that irrigation system out of and stop having to dump money into that irrigation system constantly and clean that up and make that park strip rock. So, and then the biggest ask here for the parks is the McGriff bathroom. Again, we've talked about how we've, started building this 5-year plan, and we've been trying to, make sure that we are planning ahead and thinking about, the things that are going to come up in some of our big, maintenance nightmares. And that is one of them by far. We constantly are in there making repairs and different things. That bathroom is over 50 years old. And so it's just one of those things that I think it's time to get that bathroom replaced.
And which ones of these was CIP?
McGriff would be, the Xeriscape would be, and the Ventrex machine would be all CIP as well. So that's all capital. Moving on to motor pool. So motor pool is, we're purchasing a big excavator. We've had our other one since 2002. So, I mean, it's 23 years old. We've got our life out of that one. And we are just trying to replace that one. It's constantly, it's at this point, we're going to start, like, we've already started dumping a lot of money into it, but it's just getting more and more expensive now. Now the tracks are needing to be replaced and different things. And so it's time to get that one replaced. That one is, we were gonna do a lease to own, and it's split between multiple different departments. We house it into motor pool because it's the easiest one, because everybody has to pay into motor pool. So when we house that one in motor pool, each person or each department just pays their share right into the motor pool contract that we do. And so that's why we've housed it there at motor pool, but it'll be utilized by storm, water, streets, and solid waste. So those will all pay into that department or to that excavator. Again, another 5-year plan project is a big snow plow. The last two that we've done are, have been multi-use trucks that we're able to use for other things. We're just needing to replace one of our big snow plows. The one that we're talking about replacing, is ready for a new, rear end. Like, we've just had a bunch of maintenance things that we know that those things are just going to start adding up to the point where we're going to have to take it out of commission and probably try to figure out something else to do. I mean, half the winter it was out of commission because we were having so many issues with it. So with that, I do want to tell you that's one of those ones that, because if we're going to order it, we have to put it on the books now, but it really won't actually even come till the 26 budget year, because it's about a 15-month lead time for those big snow plows like that. But it's one of those things to get the PO out and to get it ordered and those kind of things. We have to show it in this budget year, even though it'll be one of those ones that won't show up till after.
What lead time did you say? Was it
15 months?
15 months? Okay.
Yeah.
Something else.
Again, snowplow truck is CIP, and so is the excavator. And then the power broom was on there as well. It's just a building maintenance thing. We can utilize it in all of the bays, the police station here, the parks shop, all the public workshops. It's a big power broom that would be utilized at all of the buildings in the city. And that's why it's also put into motor pool, because that's where building maintenance is housed. Police motor pool, they're asking for 4 police vehicles. Again, part of the 5-year plan, we've tried to spread the police vehicles out in a way that we're not having to buy 10 a year, 1 year, and then the next year we only buy 1 or those kind of things. We've been trying to spread that out. That's how we've done the 5-year plan. So this year we're asking for 2 patrol vehicles, 1 CSO vehicle, and 1 unmarked vehicle. That would be, one of your detectives, lieutenants, chief. And all of that would be CIP. And then water department. We've seen, well, and you guys know this because we've talked about, street repairs and those kind of things, but the increase in the market for asphalt has just gone up so crazy. And so this is just for any time that we are doing any kind of patch. So when we do, a water leak, we have to repatch the road. If we have a valve with an issue, we have to redo the road and redo the collar for the valve. And so all of that would be part of why we're having that increase. And that's just what we're seeing. Like, we've already hit our asphalt budget for the year. I mean, and we haven't even done our spring patches yet. So it's one of those things that we'll have to be able to, or that we have some money that we'll be able to move and be able to bring that. We'll probably bring some of that back to you guys in June as a budget amendment. The watering sampling, it's just one of those years. So every like 4 years, there is different programs that come out. Well, this is a huge national lead and copper thing that we have to do. And so it's a very expensive thing. We actually have to take a ton of bottles out to our citizens. We ask them to fill based on how old their house is, if they still have, you know, old galvanized pipes and those kind of things. And so it's just a program that is mandated to us from the feds. And so it's one of those things that it's just, we have to do. This next one is the PRVs. So you will see our normal as part of our 5-year plan that, you know, how we've been trying to replace PRVs every other year. Well, there's that budget, but this year is just one of those weird ones where we have 2 subdivisions going up on the hill that are landing with PRVs in them. And so we try to, the way we've spread those PRVs out is that, you know, every other road we try to put a PRV so that we can control the pressure coming down the hill. And it just happens to be that both of the new subdivisions.
What is a PRV for everyone's benefit?
Pressure reducing valve.
I know, I just.
Yeah. So it slows down the pressure of the water coming down the hill. So, and make sure that we have some kind of control of the water coming off the hill. So, it's one of those things because we have put those new vaults in that, and they're not really new anymore to us. We've had them for almost 10 years now, but the vaults that we put into our system, because they have air monitors and the safety aspects for all of our workers, we pay half of the cost for the PRV, and the developer pays the other half for the PRV. Instead of the developer coming in with these old concrete vaults and they're very unsafe for our guys and putting them in the road. These ones will actually be taken out of the road in a park strip. It's a safety aspect for our employees and anybody that has to work with those PRVs at all. And so that's where that cost is. And then an outlet metering station, just like I talked about with the Citizen Budget Committee, it's one of those things that we have to give reporting to the state every year about the water loss that we have, right? That we measure our water, you know, when it comes into our system, and then we take all of our billing, and there's obviously going to be some kind of water loss if you have a leak or if you have different things. Well, the state has adjusted and really came down on the cities about making sure that we know our water loss really well. And this is one of those things that will help us, that when we did our inspection, that they came out, they basically said, hey, for instance, Rice Creek, we measure the water coming into Rice Creek. Well, some nights, because the spring is so good, you know, we can see 17, 18, 2,000 gallons a minute coming into the spring. Well, at nighttime, when nobody's using the water, those tanks will fill up and there's almost nowhere for it to go. So it'll go out into the creek. Well, on our loss reports, we were being measured that we were using that water, but we weren't charging for it. And so these are some of those things that they told us, hey, you need to have a outlet metering station at some of those places so that you can determine if you actually really chlorinated that water and those different things. And so it's just something that's coming down from the states about what, you know, our making sure that we're monitoring our water. So that's where that comes from. Again,
Are you done with water? Are you moving on?
I was just going to tell you the ones that are in capital.
Okay.
So the two.
Because I had one question when you're done.
The 2 PRVs and the metering station would be a capital for the water department. So it wouldn't be into CIP because it'd be into the water department itself. Go ahead.
Okay. I should have asked this before the meeting, but I didn't have time to talk to you. I had a question on the water meters. It says 90 new homes, townhomes. I don't know if this is wrong, but it says that it's a negative, that it's going down year over year, the cost, but it looks like it's going up year year over year. So I don't know if that might just be a mistake in the yellow sheet. It's, you'll just see it under meters and new connections.
I'd have to look at it.
It increases by $36,500, but then it shows a negative 13.5% reduction from last year, and I was just confused by that. It's in the yellow sheet, John.
Yeah, if I remember from the discussion 2 weeks ago, the yellow sheet had some mathematical errors that I don't think we got fixed.
Oh, okay.
So I was looking on the budget sheet to see if it was corrected.
Year over year, but it's truly not.
Yeah, so it's
And the water metering is one of those situations that.
If it's just a
we talked
simple,
about.
if it's just a simple error, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something special about that line item or something that needed to be explained.
and it has an offsetting revenue.
And
so-
that is one of those ones that I was just gonna say the same thing, that it's
Yeah.
one of those offsetting revenues that we get because we get impact fee money that pays
Yeah.
for the meter, and then we have to show the expense on this side, so.
Okay, thanks.
Next is the sewer department. Sewer department's pretty straightforward. We had a small, so I want to make sure that you guys see that is going up to $60,000. That's not a $60,000 increase for the SLRAT. It was a 4% increase. And that was just from the company that we use, for the SLRAT. Again, that's that sound equipment that we put into the meter or the sewers. We're able to know if we have any kind of blockages or any issues in that area so that we can really utilize our machines and clean the places that are actually dirty, not just where we were guessing. So an air monitor, again, when it comes to sewer, we got to make sure that our guys are safe. And so we drop an air monitor anytime that we open up a manhole. We drop an air monitor to make sure that certain gases and that we're not putting our guys in a certain in harm's way. And so that's just for a new air monitor. We haven't purchased one since I think the last time was in 2014. Sewer lining, just like we've done for years. Just wanted to put that on there. And then the camera unit, that is, we have got an update to that, and that's actually went down to about $8,000. And that's to update and repair one of our sewer cameras. And then we have the Central Weber increase that we got the numbers for yesterday. Could you help me out with that, John?
It went from 270 to 294 a quarter. So about $100,000 annually.
Ooh. Go team.
Again, capital, you got the sewer lining. And that is it on that one. The rest of it is maintenance. The next one is stormwater. So this one is some of the same manhole rehabbing that we're doing with sewer. We are trying to start with stormwater. This is just an infiltration problem, but it's the reverse side of it. In sewer, we're trying to not let a bunch of water into our sewer system. This one is a lot of times when we're filling up basins and different things, we have a ton, or because of the cracks and the older manholes that we have there, when we get those basins filling up, well, so are those manholes, and so they'll start pouring water, and we've had issues where they'll pour water and they start flooding a yard or getting close to putting water into a yard, or it's coming up in the road because it's now coming out of that manhole. When we seal that, it won't be able to do some of those things. Street sweeping contract, again, just showing you that that's the cost, bringing that to your attention. This one is just a new tractor mower. We have a big gang mower in that department that we've had since 2012, I believe, and it just needs to be replaced. That will be a capital expense. That does all of our big ponds that we can use that with. The utility vehicle is mostly for our spraying. So it's an ATV that we are able to put our spraying unit on and be able to spray, our channels, making sure we're spraying our rock basins, different place where we can't get our trucks into. And so we use that ATV to do that. And that's fully equipped. That's with all the spraying equipment and everything for that one. And then again, a lining project, just like sewer, but we are having a big issue over at Orton Park where we hold a lot more water than we ever used to. And so what we're having is we have a big, gosh, I went blank. Is it 30-inch line, John?
Yeah,
I think it's a big 30-inch line or 36 maybe that comes out of there, but it's really weird. It dead ends. It was supposed to be able to, for future use when either Monroe came in or that we could tie it down 2100 and we'd have to take it all the way to Washington. Well, we have this line that's been there for 40 years that is dead ended, but it's because and it's an old concrete pipe that comes out of the pond. The problem with it is it causes us a ton of damage. I bet you anytime that you've seen that the pond's full, have you seen the water coming out of the road near Orton Park there? So that's that pipe there. And it's not only just coming up in the road and causing us damage in the road, but it also, there's about 4 homes there that see water from that pipe there too. All of their backyards are almost unusable anytime that we fill up that pond because that pipe is leaking, and so it makes its way over and causes a bunch of damage to those houses. So by lining that is basically the cheapest scenario, because if not, we'd have to take that pipe all the way to Washington Boulevard down 2100. And I think when Eric brought that up, it was like at $2 or $3 million. So like this is even though it's a very expensive $350,000, it's the cheapest option we have to get that repaired over there. That is a capital expense. The vehicle or the ATV is, the mower is, and the manhole rehabs, those are all capital. And then solid waste, spring cleanup, just wanted to identify that one. We've got word that we are going to have a 4% increase on hauling from Republic. That's kind of how our contract is written. So anywhere from 2 to 4%, depending on where the CIP for their stuff lands. And that's where it landed. It was like at 5 something, so they can give us the max at 4. And then can replacement, we've increased that about $8,000. And it's one of those things that most of the city's cans were purchased in the early 2000s, unless you have a newer home than that. But the bulk of the city's cans were purchased in the early 2000s. So we're just seeing where it's just like, we're just having this replacement. We've went to a cheaper vendor, not a cheaper can, but a cheaper vendor. And we've been trying to save money that way, but we're still replacing quite a bit of cans. And so that's just the increase that we're seeing year to date.
But we're still not charging people for can replacement.
No, sir.
And that was something we thought about last year, but
Been brought up, it has been that to replace the can. And that conversation's always just one of those tough ones, because sometimes the Republic, garbage can is the one that smashes the can and breaks it. And so it's
But
always been that tough conversation.
sometimes they smash the can because somebody put 300 pounds of concrete in the bottom.
Very true. Yeah, very true. So
Not that you did that.
That's a hot topic in our neighboring city right now.
Yeah.
They're having a ton of issues with their cans.
Yeah.
And it's a problem. Luckily, I don't think it's been as big of a problem over here for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe the vendor is slightly more easy on the cans or something.
It's the same vendor.
It is the
Oh,
same vendor now.
oh, then that-
Yeah.
We buy more quality cans. That's all I could
Maybe,
think.
maybe. So that's all the updates I have. Is there any other questions you guys have?
I have a question, and maybe this is more for a future meeting than just this local, enterprise streets and motor pool and parks question, but how much are we taking out of the CIP fund this year versus previous years and versus what we expected to? Are we spending it more than we're investing in it? Are we depleting that too quickly? Is this expected?
So I don't have it. Sorry, John.
So for CIP, it is something we will talk about in more detail. And for some reason I can't get to the sheet, but it is it's not that far out of normal because some of those things, as were mentioned, motor pool and some of those expenses are coming out, but it is last year. So through 2024, it was 1.8 million. The year before that, it was 1.3. And of course, these are blank, but it's in that $1.5 to $2 million range. Understanding that a lot of those CIPs that Dave just went through are the CIP and the individual funds. So water has its own CIP fund and stuff. So in the general fund, it's not that unusual at this point. However, it's not an insignificant amount of money. I mean, we're talking about $1 million+ every year for CIP, which is typically to replace and fix things in the city is what most of it is. So
Just a follow-up question on that. If a need arises within the year that you weren't expecting, but it falls within the CIP range, it fits in that category, then do you do a budget amendment to spend CIP money?
So we would come to the council with a budget amendment, and that is part of the reason that the council has decided to keep a reserve in the CIP fund as well for those kind of unexpected things. And so we would have both sources available, the capital project reserve and the general fund reserve, which are two different pots of money as options.
And I think that was one of the budget committee things as well, is that if we know year to year what, I still want to call it surplus, but what we didn't spend last year or the previous year, because I think it takes 2 months, since we're 2 months behind on sales tax, then we don't know the full fiscal year until August, right? And so I think but it would still be good, at least for council, to know where we hit, so it's almost like we made a budget and then, yay, we finished that year, but then we don't really know what the full impact was until August, but then we're doing something else and we don't hear about it. There's no feedback to how well we did or how horrible we did. I mean, obviously if we didn't meet it, then we have to, do a budget amendment, but if we don't, we never know.
So actually, well, we do know, being on the audit committee, the area or the time we find out all this stuff is when we do the audit.
Right.
And
But
that's
like
that's
December.
6 months later. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
That's because it takes that long to pull all the receipts and all the expenses and revenues. And then that's when we get that big, long document is the audit saying what we saved throughout the year.
And on your budget worksheet, it does show you the prior years. That'll show at least the transfer that was made over. So it does give you 2 years of actual expenditures, actual revenues.
That's into the CIP. I'm just talking about what your yes or your surplus or behind on each year to year expenses to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can give you that report. It is part of what we typically get the finance director will send out a kind of a quick summary sometime around September, October that says, hey, here's the funds that we're under by a little bit. Here's the funds that were close. But it goes to the audit committee, and the quarterly report essentially is the final wrap up for the year. And then it shows up in the actual audit.
And there's not a good or easy way to get it sooner than that, since it's like a 6-month lag.
I mean, probably that September, October is the quickest, because that's usually after the auditors have come in and moved the things around that need to be. And sales taxes come in and everything and all the expenses. So we have some vendors that don't bill us for 3 months. And some of those we know and we kind of anticipate, but some we don't know and we just, so it takes usually 2 months, 3 months to kind of close out the books for the year.
Plus sales tax don't even come until late August, so.
Yeah, sales tax is slow.
Can I ask, I don't know, can I ask a question about last week's budget topic? I mean, we're on the budget agenda.
No, you can't ask it.
I missed that meeting and I listened to it more, some of it more than once, but I had one thing that I don't know, struck me, I guess, is just it was mentioned the need for a parking lot at Barker Park, like as soon as possible. And I know there's some money that has been put from the CIP towards Barker Park investments, but that's going to go towards engineering costs. And I just don't know if there's a way that we can speed things up a little bit to get that parking. We have so many events there and so much struggle there. And even if we assume there's going to be a grant and then there's not, but we happen to have just what we need just in case the grant comes in. I don't know. I guess that was one thing I would have said if I was there in person last week. So I don't know if anyone has any ideas or solutions on that or if that's
agree.
out of reach.
No, I mean, there's 200K in there for Barker Park, and I think that's kind of the seed money. I don't even know if I would say that because it's going to cost more than that, obviously. But I think parking is an issue, and I think we're going to see that in spades come July 4th. But I think that's just going to drive it home that how much we need to concentrate on that.
If we don't approve it now, then that means it won't happen until a year and a half from now. Right. So,
So
next year.
there is the budget amendment process. So the hope was that with the 200 grand, we could get some good information as far as what's going to be required for underground engineering and above ground landscaping and planning. And then to really start looking at doing some aggressive fundraising matched with ramp grants, matched with impact fee money to get this park finished quick. And if we can use those 3 pots with the ramp will give us they like it when you get lots of donations. So I know the mayor has been actively talking with folks. If we can get a lot of money donated, then ramp will do multi-year projects and we can start phasing it out. And that's kind of the goal, but we kind of need that 200,000 picture. But I think I haven't talked to Eric, but if the council's okay with that 200,000 kind of planning money to really dial in the plan, we might have enough information that we can then go out to some of the larger donors and use them as a basis to ask for a fairly large ramp grant or at least a multi-year ramp grant and start getting that in the ground, focusing on the island, or maybe with SWAT, we're focusing on the other area just to get it going. And I would say that we don't just want to put a parking lot in the middle of an alfalfa field because the alfalfa field can't be run, but 2, we want to make sure that we are providing amenities that are more than just a parking lot. Ramp isn't going to fund just parking lots. They want something fun that has their name on it because that's the purpose of the grant is to create places for the Weber County residents to go and recreate.
so it sounds like it's a bigger project. You can't just take it little steps at a time and we have to do it all at once and it might be 5 years down the road.
Well, so we could do like the island in one.
Okay.
We could go and say, hey, we're going to put the island in and the playgrounds and get feedback on the type of landscaping. I know that the citizen committee has suggested a wildflower area, and I think there's those things we can do. But the northern field, we may be able to carve in half and do half and half. But so you're looking probably these 3 phases, unless someone came in and won the lottery and gave us $20 million, then we could do it all in a year. And at 20 million, that might be more than it takes, but you never know.
I do agree with the need for parking in that area. It seems like it would make sense to, in a phasing process, because we just kind of know we're not going to be able to do it all at once. It seems like the first phase would be parking lot and something that makes for an appealing ramp grant with that. So parking lot and soccer field, or parking lot and playground, or something that it's not just the parking lot, but seems like that would be the best way to get ramp involved from the beginning. But I just think that that parking lot, like the big parking lot, has kind of got to be first-ish because of all the events that are held there. And we've had so many issues with parking during the nativity and during other events that it would really relieve that neighborhood.
Well, I'm concerned though, if we're only putting aside enough money for the study to happen, then this parking lot's for sure out of the question in the 26 budget year. Is that right?
Well, it would take a budget amendment, and my recommendation would be to set the goal of having I'm going to call it the landscaping design finalized in the first 2 or 3 months of the fiscal year. So by September, and then we can come to the council and say, okay, here's the information. Now let's look at our 5-year plan and when we can accomplish things. And if the council at that time wants to fund now, they could. But we'd really want to look at what it's going to cost and not bite off more than we can chew, or, as you mentioned earlier, deplete our reserves in a way that we put something at risk if all of a sudden the road washes out or something. So.
Thank you.
I think, John, if I'm reading this budget right, there's nothing budgeted going into CIP for budget fiscal 26.
Yeah, it didn't get updated into Cassell yet before we printed it off. So it will be ready for the capital project discussion in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but it's zero now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
Everything's zero. Yeah.
we're not budgeting anything. Yeah. So it's interesting I wish I could give you the number that would coincide with the 1.81 that I gave you earlier. The trouble is that our current CIP blends all the funds together in the spreadsheet. And so I can't extrapolate it really quick and easy, other than to say that the bottom number is not dramatically different, with the exception of there is a big expense for the 450 East right-of-way. That's part of the WACOG grant they're giving us. So there's a $3 million project where the city's putting in 10% of the money, but the full 3 million goes through there. So it looks like a lot of money. Well, a lot of money is being spent, but not all of it is city money. So, but we'll talk about that in a little more in detail in 2 weeks with the admin, police, and capital project stuff.
So the one thing I wanted to see if we were doing or not was the pool depreciation. Is that something that is going in for this year, or the equipment? Because we talked about that when we agreed to the RDA funds, and I just wanted to see if that was.
So as of right now, there's not a line in the budget sheet for the depreciation of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not following that.
The equipment.
So when we put in the new playground, it's going to cost $300,000. And so if that has a life of 20 years, we would charge $15,000 a year.
Okay, and that's something since the beginning of the aquatic center we hadn't ever
Correct.
tracked in depth.
So
Okay,
we're dumping 2.56 million in it. And if we're not going to depreciate it, then we're going to eat that in another 10 years.
okay. Good idea.
Sorry. So, I mean, if we don't depreciate that, we're going to eat another 1.56 whatever million dollars in the next 10, 15 years to replace that equipment. So it's either you eat the elephant a little bit now, or you put out a bond or something to go fix the pool or fill it with cement and move it on. But that's what
Actually, Councilmember Pulver, the general fund, that's a general fund. The aquatic center portion is a subcategory, and you can't depreciate assets there. So what you need to do is just build the fund balance so that you'd have the money down the road. But
So you can't, okay. Say that one more time. So you can't, if
you
it's
look
in
at the
general
If you
fund.
look at the general fund, you don't
Right.
see any items for depreciation in the general fund.
Gotcha.
But that doesn't stop you from building the fund to have the money when you need it. But you don't do it through depreciation. You'd have to do it just through a revenue bump or an expense reduction to build the fund balance. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Then when you combine everything in a big consolidated statement, you can depreciate it, but individually in each general fund category, state law doesn't allow, that's my understanding. But you can still build the fund by having excess revenues over expenditures.
So you could put in a line item that makes it look like you're depreciating each year, but you're not officially
The
tracking
equipment
it.
savings program. Yeah, something like that.
Right.
So what?
That's what you're explaining, that you can't on paper say that you're depreciating the assets in the aquatic center, but we can put a line that says these are our savings to the future to.
Well, that's your fund balance, right? So you just increase your revenues if you want to increase the fund balance. Right now, it's a basically break even, right? With no depreciation. That's our hope anyway. We haven't quite got there yet, but we've got closer. So basically, you just increase your fees enough to have a $200,000 or $250,000 a year profit, which falls into the aquatic center fund balance. So when 10 or 15 years comes, you've got the money to do that. And you'll see that in the budget. You'll see transfers from, I can't remember the exact transfer from fund balance, or
Yeah, so
you can do that.
yeah, you can exactly, the mayor's point is exactly correct. As a CPA, surprise, surprise, but you'd have a line item that's transferred to fund balance and then transfer out. So that would be the kind of language that's typically used in the general fund.
But you can do it.
Yeah.
Conceptually, you can accomplish what you're talking about.
Okay.
It's just substance over form.
I'll trust you.
Okay, thank you. What else, John?
That's everything for the budget.
All right, Dave, anything else
No, sir. Thank you.
you've got? Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's move on to item number 9. This is going to be led by Mr. Call. He's going to talk to us about the 2025 Cherry Days marketing plan.
Thank you, Mayor. So, council, this is just kind of a summary of the Cherry Days event, the type of activities that are going on and how we're going to get the word out. And then it also identifies some goals that we have for Cherry Days. The main thing, it doesn't highlight every single thing we're doing, but it does talk about the main things like the 5K, the parade, the kids parade, the vendor fair, fireworks, medallion show, car show, or medallion search, car show, luau. But it really kind of focuses on the idea that the way we're going to get the information out about these things, for us currently, the plan is to do a heavily social media and electronic, in part because we haven't built at this point into the budget any sort of a mail to every house mailer approach. The purpose of this discussion tonight is to spark some ideas on, hey, what if we try this? What if we do this? A good example is the mayor, in our pre-meeting, mentioned, well, if we had an A-frame or a man sign, that's kind of, meant to be walked by, and put them in front of Lee's and Smith's and some of the businesses that get a lot of walk-in traffic, then people could see, hey, this is what's going on. Maybe there's a QR code that they could scan to just understand everything. But the critical thing is not as much on the day of the 4th, because a lot of people kind of plan on that, but those kind of earlier things in the week are the items that are going to be the ones that'll be the hardest to drive people to. We could do a postcard mailer, you know, it's a smaller kind of, think of it as a half sheet front and back. Those are fairly cheap at about 19 to 27 cents, depending on how it's done. But even at that, if you send it to, just call it 7,000 homes, I mean, that's $1,750 or something like that, maybe closer to 2,000 by the time you include printing costs. So there's things we can do. But right now, the main idea is to do kind of a electronic plan with some targeted signs around the city, some flyers we can hand out, and then just get the word out that way. And again, the goal is kind of really to keep this focused as a community level. We always get people from other communities coming in. Some of them are related to folks who are here. Some of them have just always come to Cherry Days. It's really good for our vendors to have those folks come in because they often will spend money. But the goal this year has to really been to focus on community, keep it the size of event that the city needs, and not try and turn it into something like the I'm trying to think, maybe Steel Days or some of those that you might have gone to in other communities where they're so big they're drawing in 2 or 3 times the population of the city for. That's not really the goal for our event this year. So any questions, or especially any suggestions on ways to help get the word out that we can give to Katie and she can try to implement?
It seems like the postcard idea isn't terrible. If it is, yeah, just a little postcard that has all of the events for Cherry Days. I just calculated 19 cents times 7,000. That's $1,300 with printing costs and everything, maybe more than that. But it seems like for the amount of people that would be reached, that could be reasonable.
Okay.
The problem that you face, I think, is the routes are like contiguous. So it spawns into Harrisville and Pleasant View. And so it doesn't turn out to be 7,000. It turns out to be 12. I mean, I couldn't, just from what I was doing campaign stuff, I only had to target certain spots.
And that's why sometimes the rate goes up from that 19 cents. Because if it's just, there's no address on it, it's this, but if there's an address, then it adds some sense. And so that's something we're going to explore.
But it's also not the worst thing if it slightly bleeds outside of North Ogden either.
Yeah.
It's just the cost. But I think, yeah, heavy electronic QR code, and I think some of that, if you start working on active QR codes, which does cost money, but you can actually track hits and stuff like that. So that might be something to think about. But I think, yeah, I mean, Instagram is kind of the key thing. If we actually had, more of a thing on X, that would be even better, but that's where the kids are. But
and Katie we have accounts at all those platforms. And so we haven't been utilizing Instagram and X as much. I think, Dave, you were going to do some TikTok videos, right? Yeah. And another thing that's critical is, each person who's part of the city, if they'll share their stuff on their own pages, you don't realize how many people you'll reach, right? And so sharing, tagging people, and just helping get the word out is going to be huge. And we've had a significant number of people who are just dying for information and reaching out to us. In particular, an overwhelming response from vendors who just want to be part of Cherry Days. I think we had 4 different Shave Ice people request, and obviously we said, look, we can't do 4. The event won't support 4, but we've been able to, like with the luau and the vendor fair, split it up and be like, hey, well, if you'll come to the vendor fair, then we have the luau, and people are encouraged by that to have options and different times to come to the city. I think we've got 1 at the luau, 1 at the car show, 1 at the vendor fair. So we've almost been able to accommodate everyone who wants to come to the city in that time frame.
I always like when there's an event on Facebook, an official event. She's probably already planning to do that, but
But it's a good thing to, we in Cherry Days, we've kind of it's a conflict group. Like there's no bad idea.
Yeah.
And so even if she's already thinking about it, she shouldn't be offended that we suggest, hey, make sure this is
Or
is
you could do
marked
like
down.
contests, you could do a photography contest or something attached to it, or tag someone to earn a prize, your chance for a raffle, or I don't know.
Free ticket to the luau. It's free.
Oh.
That's okay. We
Yeah.
can give away lots of free tickets and then people will come, right?
Tag someone for everything.
Anything else, John?
No, that was the report back on that one.
I think getting the word out sooner than later is good because I know a lot of families kind of plan activities. So
Timeline looked good.
even on social media now, if we start getting the preliminary, I think things are pretty well nailed down. I'll start getting those out. Having people share them would be good.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion.
Anything else?
So just on that point, there is a 2025 Cherry Days page on the website. If you go to northogdencherrydays.com, it just forces you back to our website. So there's already some information on there, a full calendar, and yeah, we'll get the word out because it's going to be fun. Dave is going to be worn out on Friday or Saturday morning at about 11 a.m. after we're all done cleaning up the park at Barker Park from the activities the day before. So,
Okay. Council, anything else you'd like to communicate to John?
I don't know if we're going to be, and then that could be something the Build Barker Park folks can do at the 4th of July stuff at Barker Park, is to kind of push that development. Not exactly some of the posters and stuff, but just the fact that, hey, did you know? Because everybody I talked to that has either been here for years or whatever doesn't know that the city owns everything north of the amphitheater.
and that's a good point. That one of the ideas we've talked about since that evening is going to be maybe a little more active is to have a group, and maybe the Build Barker Park group is a good idea of, hey, they could come and run some kid games, free kid games with, small prizes of candy or whatever, and just help get the word out.
Or just have tours through the trails or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So it should be a fun time.
Okay, thank you, John. Feel free to communicate any ideas to John if you have them come to your minds later. Let's move on then to item number 10, which is our council department reports. Councilmember Dowpaz, do you have anything burning to report on the police department?
I have a report. Am I okay to say the name of the officer that was offered the position, or should we not say it yet? Nope.
Is he accepted?
I'll just say that we have, okay. So we have a conditional job officer or job offer for a police officer one that was extended. This is for someone that is self-sponsored doing the Weber State Police Academy and is expected to graduate on May 2nd. So that's good news that the force is filling back up. And there are background investigations that are ongoing right now for 2 lateral police officer candidates that we are looking at. Also good news is the Officer Griggs and K9 Anya have passed all of their certifications and are deployed on the street. And then last but not least, Chief Einen is working on an update of the departmental policy manual, which should be published in the next few weeks. So thanks for sending those to me, Chief Einen, and that is my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Dowpaz. Councilmember Severing, were you going to report for him? Did he
Yes.
send a report? Councilmember Barker, go ahead.
He did not send me a report though.
Okay.
Yeah, he asked me. So Scott, if you send Councilmember Severing a report, if you want to give it, I mean, he didn't forward it on to me.
Yes. Councilmember Severing asked myself and then Nate Davis, our building official, for a report. From Nate Davis, Northview Phase 9 home permits are coming in. So we're seeing continued home building happen in the city, as well as the Freedom Courts townhomes have started the first unit. Those are down on 1700 North. just south of Village of Providence Point. So they've been doing underground utilities, but we'll start to see the vertical construction there. From the planning department, we see Barker Depot continue with the America First Credit Union's site plan being reviewed at Planning Commission next week, as well as the Lyman Barker annexation request. Planning Commission received a training on housing variety and moderate income housing and is considering ways that North Ogden can best serve housing needs and future growth for its current and incoming residents. So as the city council, I would expect to see maybe some general plan recommendations and zoning recommendations coming from Planning Commission. Thank you.
Scott, would it be okay at some point in time if we include in your report an update on major developments like what's going on at Providence Point? Have we seen anything there? Century Farms, is there going anything submitted there? Is Cooperstown moving forward? I think if you could incorporate at some point in time updates on the major projects in the city in addition to the one you just mentioned, I think that would be good. I think that would give the council a feel for hopefully down the road implementing an ordinance on the use of park impact fees. If they're serious about doing Barker Park. That's where basically the majority of the funds are going to come from, and they're relying on a lot of these projects. So if you wouldn't mind incorporating that.
And
future
just
reports.
really quickly, there's been movement on all three of those projects, Village at Providence Point, Cooperstown, and Century Farms. But it's been internal reviews of improvement drawings. There's a minor subdivision at Village at Providence Point, and Cooperstown is dealing with some minor changes in their site plan drawing. I've sent the mayor a request that they had there. So it's all small updates, nothing building permit yet, no final plans, but I will be sure to include that in future reports.
I think what you're referring to on Cooperstown is they want to downsize the clubhouse.
Yeah, because they pulled the units out and they have a clubhouse now that they feel is oversized for the total number of residential units, missing those on the south side of 1500 North in Ogden. So they don't want to downsize the size of the space, but they would like to utilize a portion of it for maybe a daycare or an office use or something else that would kind of bifurcate what would have been a full clubhouse for the area.
Yeah, we probably need to get back to them on that.
Yeah.
My fault on that one.
No, you're good. Thank you all.
Okay, Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
I'd like to give a report on the Parks
Yep.
Department.
Jamie texted me, said Orton Playground's been completely demolished. The new pad is prepped. Concrete border and sidewalk was poured today. Playground should be on site any day now, and construction of it will begin almost immediately. They've got water onto all the park bathrooms and are making any repairs needed, and they should have them open by the end of the week, next week, not this week. And they've started mowing parks as needed. They do have still just their full-time crew. Seasonals will start end of April to May.
Okay.
So it's coming. And one last thing, Councilmember Watson and I met with CTC members yesterday about some signage over at the skate park, and I talked with Jamie about it today. They want to put up, if I remember correctly, positive reinforcement type signs. Is that right? Okay, for the youth at the skate park, and Jamie said it'd be great to have banners up. When I mentioned that they want to paint maybe some of the skate park ramps, he said they will be vandalized. It's not if, but when they will be. And also if we put a mural up on the wall at the softball or the baseball diamond, it will get vandalized too. So the CTC just wants to know if this council would like to help support this, because if it gets vandalized, we will be the ones that have to pay for it.
But they have a grant willing to pay for whatever initially they put up.
So are you looking for feedback from the council and if
Just
they
what the
like them to
council's
proceed?
general thoughts are, and they will come back and do a formal presentation, but since we met with them yesterday, we said we can bring it up. And
Was it the signage as well that they believed would be potentially vandalized if there were
Jamie said
positive
that'll probably
affirmations?
he said that'll probably get vandalized too.
Yeah.
But signage.
Wouldn't the
and-
positive affirmation cut down on the cussing and swearing at the skate park?
I mean,
No.
Well, and in that mode, Dave's team in their ingenuity have, they're talking about building our own camera trailer. So instead of going out and buying one of those that you'll see in like Home Depot or Walmart, yeah, working with people like that and then building a trailer down there, which should help with some of the vandalism. Not all of it, but at least help. Hopefully it doesn't get vandalized. It won't, based on what we talked about design wise, but that's something that we're looking at doing as well to help deter vandalism in that park particular.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Did you get the answer you wanted? Not really.
You want to give a heads up or no?
Well, I just, if there's, I swear there's some kind of a paint or something you put over it that helps clean off easier, or graffiti to be cleaned off easier as opposed to redoing it because somebody tagged it with something. So if, as long as they do that, I think we'll be fine, but
Well, I learned last week to stay out of the paint, so I'm looking at John and Dave and they're saying yes.
okay.
Okay, so do you want them to proceed?
Proceed to hear their presentation?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else, Councilmember Barker?
Nope.
All right, we'll go to item number 11 now. If there's any further public comments anyone would like to make this evening, now would be the time.
Switched.
So again, just step up to the podium, rostrum, whatever you want to call it. State your name and if you're a resident of North Ogden. And nobody online, John, raising their hand that I see.
No raised hands.
Okay, we'll forego that. Ryan, do you have any comments you'd like to make tonight on behalf of the staff? Dave, anything further? Scott, Chief? John?
Just a reminder, as we get near Cherry Days, we will have assignments for the council. We're hoping each of you can participate. Those of you who would like to MC, we may have a chance for you to MC an event or a parade or something if you'd be interested. And then one of the big things I mentioned earlier is going to be cleanup. So the day after the fireworks and the day after the luau and things, we're going to make sure we're going through those parks and grabbing stuff, as well as, for example, at Barker Park, trying to put up a snow fence. So if the wind blows in the middle of the night, it will catch up as not all of it, obviously, but as much of it as we can, so that we can pick it up a little easier and not have to go across the street and pick as much out of
Ryan's
the field.
house.
Those neighbors.
But so it's a family friendly activity. Bring kids can help, spouses can help. It's one of those things that it's a big lift, and it'd be nice if every day it wasn't the same people doing it. So we might try and just coordinate. It also, as you hear about people running for office, so that the sign up for office is over in 2 months. So it's the first week of June. But we will be reaching out to those as well to help participate, those who are running for office to, and the plan is if they're volunteering, they can wear their shirts, just like they could if they're walking around the fairs. But the idea is that we are going to lean on them to help make this successful, because there's a lot of lifting and the employees can't do it all on their own.
So John, have you got assignments out to the council?
Not yet. We are going to talk about them, and specifically, if you wouldn't mind having a microphone in your hand and doing an MC at like the luau or something like that, let us know. And we will, Dave and I will approve all jokes before you're allowed to.
Is that a joke?
Yeah, I didn't. We learned from the mayor's jokes that I'm kidding. There weren't any that crossed the line, but for the Christmas party.
I do want to point out some have assignments, John.
Yes.
Some have them completed.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So
mayor.
a good example is the mayor has, I believe, fulfilled every assignment he's been given as far as Grand Marshal, sunrise ceremony. He's been on top of it. So
I'm done.
So the rest of you who haven't even been given an assignment yet need to catch up.
If I bring a bunch of youth with me, then I just have to do it once.
You can do that. All right, council, anything you've heard from citizens you'd like to make staff aware of or anything? Okay, I have no comments. So we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Council.